it's DragBoss Tim Halstead. Welcome to the DragBoss Garage and Darin Morgan induction. So I hope you enjoyed that little intro there of the JC51. That's Clinton.
Thanks for that, by the way.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That was a little surprise for you. And I want to welcome everybody here. And I hope you brought your sweetheart since it's Valentine's Day so they can get educated and enjoy this great hobby that we have. So a couple things I want to go over. Everybody's welcome to be here. We got Don Dotterer, Mike Cranston from New Zealand, Eric McMahon, Jeff Otts. Good to see you guys here. FYI, IHRA will be here tomorrow, live chat at 7 p.m., which I'm pretty excited about. You know, a big sanctioning body, so that's impressive to me. But one of the things I saw in the past couple days was a couple things. The P-38 Lightning was an airplane from World War II, and it was turbocharged. And it had an issue with the turbocharger. Once it got to a ceiling past 12,000 feet, the thing lost power. It wouldn't respond. They had all these issues. Well, it took a little guy from Oklahoma. Forgot his name now. But he ended up figuring it out by using a pair of cellophane, which was made out of aluminum for Lucky Strikes back then, and found out that the cooling line for the turbocharger, the oil line, actually got cold at elevation and was causing the wastegate not to operate correctly. So he fixed it with, cigarette paper or foil and some wire, changed the course of the events. Just like with, who was it now? Hastings. They made the piston ring for the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that was developed here by Packard. It came from England, and then Packard started developing it and found out it would only run for about 50 hours before it didn't make any power, lost ring seal. Well, they had all these, they couldn't import it from Britain, the rings, because of the way the war was going on. So the guy from Hastings developed chrome and coated the rings with chrome. It was pretty amazing to hear this story. And that kind of brings in that engine, the JC51. If it wasn't for Cunningham and you, Darin, to put time into that, that engine would have never been here. Now, it's not the same engine.
And Mose Nolan and the engineers at Ford who busted their ass and got that done in 8.5 months.
And that's the thing. Those guys are all gone now, and that's why we're
gone.
This, huh?
They're all gone.
Oh yeah, just like the guys from World War II. Most of those guys are gone. And the stuff that we're doing now, I kind of put it in that perspective because, Jeff Ott was talking to me earlier, saying, "Look, I've been waiting all my life to find someone that could tell me this kind of stuff." We have that thirst for knowledge that we want to learn this, not only to go faster and help our program, but to be able to understand this because these are concepts are difficult. So tonight's live chat's going to be about what? Too many cubic inches and not airflow?
A couple of things.
Yeah. What are they?
Reading the parts, primarily the burn signature in the combustion chamber and how that relates to wet flow and fuel fallout.
Yep.
And then I came across an engine last year and got a chance to try to help it. And it's one of those engines like Extreme Pro Stock or Pro Mod. Mm-hmm. Now, Pro Mod isn't normally an aspirated engine,
right,
where you have this situation where the undersquare ratio of the engine, meaning the bore, is small compared to the stroke. When you have a 5,050 bore and a 6,250 stroke,
wow,
that's really undersquare.
Yeah.
And when you're designing an engine to make the most power possible, the first thing you got to look at is, what's my bore size? Then what valve can I fit in there? How efficient is that valve? And how much airflow can I get through that valve? And that's going to dictate pretty much the power band of the engine. So
okay,
we'll talk about this engine, which is a high piston speed. It's not extremely, there's endurance, 5,000 feet per minute mean piston speed. All NA drag racing engines, 55 to 65. This one's about close to 7,500 feet per minute with a 1:3 rod ratio.
Wow.
So, yeah, the piston velocity is off the scale. But it's not as bad as current Extreme Pro Stock or Pro Mod engines who have the same rod ratio and are even more undersquare. And they're what we refer to as undervalved engines. And what does an undervalved engine mean? It means that engine's airflow requirement is much higher than that valve could ever supply. So if you look at your peak piston CFM demand versus where you're running the engine, NA engines, unlimited NA engines, we want that valve is perfectly matched to that engine speed. In order to get 124 VE, that valve, if it requires 630 CFM at net lift, it flows that. And we bring everything, all the design characteristics to optimize that. We know that's the most efficient range. But let's say we shrunk the bore down and increased the stroke. Well, we're not going to be able to hit that engine speed or get the power out. So there are certain things that we have to do, and I'll go into that.
Okay.
You mentioned, what was the first thing you talked about? It was the P38.
Yeah, the Lightning. Yeah. With the turbocharged.
Well, there's also a story I love to tell because on the history of World War II, engines and specifically, and the aircraft too. I'm kind of an aircraft buff, I guess you would say.
Yep.
But back when they were island hopping, right before Midway, the engines in some of these aircraft were fouling out. And they would come back with fouled out plugs, and they would have to lean the engine and load it real hard to try to clean the plugs up. Well, you don't want to be in a dogfight and have a plug go out.
Right.
So he thought, he didn't know, this man knew nothing of heat range, of anything. But he had these plugs out of a bomber, an air-cooled engine, and they were hotter. They ran a lot hotter. Now, you have to realize in the military, you don't go against the book.
Wow.
That's an offense. That's a court-martialable offense.
It is.
So he had one pilot, a badass ace, that said, do it. I won't say a thing. And he did, and that engine not only gained power and altitude, he could run it lean, rich, no matter where he put the air-fuel mixture or loaded it. It was less detonation sense. It was just great. He came back raving about it. They couldn't tell anybody. So it was like 6 months before Midway, the other pilots got wind of this. So he just started putting the plugs in all of them. And they were badass. So the word started getting around. And the commanding officer at the time heard about it, went to him, and he said, listen, I know I could be court-martialed for this, but I put these plugs in there. They run cleaner because they were like 3 or 4 heat ranges higher. They don't foul. They don't fail. So the old plugs failed. These never fail. I don't see the problem. So he went to high command, told them about that. They had all the engineers going in there.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't 2 months later that every aircraft out there had those plugs. So here we go. We have a guy that's not an engineer. He's not an engine guy. He was hired to do this job. He saw a problem, and he figured it out. And 50% of this is that.
It's like this guy was the same guy almost because it was in the Pacific Theater. It's humid over there in the Philippines or wherever it was. And that's where they noticed these problems. And this guy was a mechanic from Oklahoma. He didn't know anything about aircraft engines, but he had the hands. He got the hands. He knew what to do. So he made that modification. It's exactly what you said. They said, oh, you can't do this. You can get court-martialed for this. They had to bring in the engineers to look at it. Long story short, they developed, this braided line to go over it, which was like $5 compared to 5 cents worth of paper, a foil that they could put on it, because it wouldn't hold up to aircraft standards is what they said. But it was crazy. The ingenuity back then, it reminds me of the pro stock days, from the 70 to 80 time, development.
I truly feel that people that are interested in this are born with a naturally mechanical mind.
Mm-hmm.
No
doubt. Yeah, I believe that too. And I bet you guys do too that are sitting here on the side. There's a lot of guys here. Charles, good to see you here. You know, I saw Chad's here, Darin. So I said hi to him.
Okay, cool.
Clint Neff's here. So hopefully he got to see that cool video. Thanks to
You
him.
know,
I was able to
also
do
you have to give credit where credit is due. And
that.
Clint
Yes.
is probably one of the most frugal racers. Everybody saw that car come out and they were thinking, oh my God, how much did he spend on that? And, you know, there was figures 150, 200,000. And if I remember correctly, Clint can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's got about 70,000 in it.
I mean, that's
That's
really
the
reasonable.
cheapest badass race car on the
Yeah.
planet.
Come on, man. No
You
doubt.
know?
Wow.
And Panhandle Performance deserves the credit for the performance of that engine right now. I don't want to leave that out.
Nope. I've heard of them before. Down in Florida, aren't they in Florida?
Yeah, Thomas. Okay. Let's see here.
Thanks, guys. We have 103 people here already. 12 minutes in, so I appreciate you guys being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. This is pictures back in 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
Of course, Mondello invented the wet flow bench, and he gave me the first one, and I worked on it for about a year. This is what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Is vortex generation and air fuel separation. You have a vortex here, here. I'll get to this later, but this is fixed. You can also see the vaporization ridge here and here. So anytime you have a sharp edge, the air fuel ratio or the air fuel mixture will separate and re-vaporize. That's called a velocity shear.
Okay.
So here you can see it down here on the seats. And you know the back cuts on the back wide a lot of times is because all of those are a shear as well. That helps atomization in the combustion chamber.
How wide? How wide are you running the back cuts when you say that?
Well, that's one of those design deals that it really depends on the angle you're using and how
Okay.
big the throat is and how far
Yep.
you're trying to shove it. But I try to never run them under 80.
Okay.
And if I only use 2, 100, and if I use 3, 75, 80, and a 90 on the last. But the more angles you have and the wider they are, the thicker the head gets, so your weight goes up. And that's one of those design aspects that you juggle depending on engine speed. This is a video of the wet flow. So you can see it's coming in, it's vaporizing here. You can't see the fine atomization. This is only a 2 megapixel camera back then, so it wasn't very good. And you can see right here on the plug, it's black. You know, every time we pulled the plugs out, there'd be a black spot. We always ask ourselves, what the hell is that? Well, it's this vortex, the air fuel separation, vortex generation over the plug. And no matter what you look at or concentrate on regarding wet flow, plug wetting is the #1 detrimental factor. That's what causes more issues. There are cylinder heads out there that won't even run properly unless you lean them out enough to get that vortex generation down so the thing could even fire decent. And on one of those engines, I literally turned 3 threads down, polished the tip of the plug, and stuck it up in the chamber in order to try to eliminate that. But those plugs only last a run or two.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a vortex here, and there's a little one over there. And all I do is just sit there and spin. But you don't need a flow bench, a wet flow bench,
Right.
to see this. This is a Dicom test. You can see it plain as day, right there. This has been in every magazine there is. This was the first time I sat there and plotted the actual direction of this airflow and this vortex generation. This is right here, you see that ridge? It wasn't there like that before. This is what a soft chamber does. And
Okay.
I'll show you why here in a second. So this is a soft chamber. By soft chamber, you take it and we use anywhere from like, out here you'll have like a 250 rim width to a 500 rim width. See if that works. And this off right here, you'll have right here about 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch, and then 4 all the way to 14 degrees, depending on what you do. NA engines, 4 to 6. Nitrous engines, 10, 12, whatever you can get away with, whatever you can do. So what you're doing is you're minimizing your quench area, and that ridge right there, the air-fuel mixture will come out around, and it'll shear off of that, and the vortex that would be here is now gone. And there are certain things you can do that most people consider insane, but this is one of those. So if you're running nitrous or any power adder for that matter, the last thing you want is a fast burn, normally aspirated chamber if you're going to boost the power. You slow that. You use bigger chambers, lower compression ratios in order to boost the VE and the dynamic compression back up. So if you use a 12 degree or a 10 degree or a 9 degree chamber that's fast burn, it limits you and it makes it extremely detonation sensitive. And it makes the whole situation 10 times worse when you have a cylinder head like this one, which is a 12 degree spread port that's super fast. It's got a center plug, and it's got a lean area right here, which I'll show you here in a minute. It's hard to get fuel over here. It makes them, the fast burn, lots of this quench area and that lean area add up to it being extremely detonation sensitive. So you can't shove the nitrous to it. So how do I get fuel over there? And why did I do it that way? And you notice I left this ridge here. That's pressure recovery. I don't want to take that out. That will hurt my intake port. So I dig out behind it. So the incoming air fuel mixture that forms the vortex here grabs it and carries it over to the lean area and eliminates it. This particular engine was running 600 shot of nitrous and never made a pass. He made like 10 passes. Burnt it up every single time. It doesn't matter how much timing you took out. He had negative timing in this thing, which is also an indicator that your chamber's way too fast. If your chamber won't take 10 or 11 degrees, you've got something wrong.
Okay.
And on nitrous, it was just instant death. And all I did was lay that back a little bit and do that and never melt it again.
How deep is that?
It's probably about 200 here, going to like 0 there.
Yep, I see. Okay.
And see, you can see I laid this back to move this vortex back away from the plug. And then here's that vortex right here that I'm using, grabbing and moving over to the lean area. Completely fixed it.
I mean, how the hell did you think
without a
that
wet flow bench. Oh, did you say something?
Yeah, how did you think that up? I mean, I mean, that's a huge grind right there. Crevice that you're just going to say, oh, I'm going to put this in here. I think this is going to help.
No,
you know what I mean?
I didn't invent this.
Okay.
I didn't come up with it. Preston at BES was doing this when I was still at Rear Morrison. And I saw one of his heads come through, and I looked at it and just went, duh.
Okay.
And
all right.
Started doing it myself to certain engines and perfected it myself, my technique, I guess. So without a wet flow bench, how would you read this combustion chamber? And do you think that this combustion chamber needs a quench cut or a soft chamber, soft cut? So
pull it away from the plug. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it's got a lot.
Yep.
This white right here, that's hot exhaust burning dead fuel is what that is. Dead fuel meaning not atomized, just in a liquid state, boiling it off and burning it slow and leaving lots of carbon buildup. And you notice that that plug right there has a dip right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right here where it
Right.
holds fuel as well. That's hard to get out on some of them. So if your chamber face was like this, your plug hole should be like that, not like this or like that. Hold on. So basically, this plug comes in real flat. So you have a chamber face like this, and the plug is coming in like this,
Okay.
and the plug face is like this, leaving this crevice to hold fuel. And I will go in there and radius that out and try to get it to breathe and get the fuel out of there. So we also see right here, we've got wet fuel.
Yep.
Oh, Harold Bettis, I asked him one time, by the way, see how clean it is here?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
In the old days, 30 years ago, we used to call that wetting. We used to think the fuel was washing the carbon off.
Yes.
It's not.
Okay.
That's
I
where
thought
no
that.
fuel exists. So the engine is very lean right there. That's
Okay.
not fuel wash, that's fuel. All the fuel where you see carbon, that's where the fuel's at. But that fuel is burning latent, too latent to create usable cylinder pressure, leaving that carbon behind. That much anyway. So you can see right here we have
Mm-hmm.
that vortex right there. If you took that and did a 4-degree soft chamber on there, that would almost go away. And you could, if you wanted to, depending on the extent of how bad or how fast the chamber is and how much you wanted to slow it down,
Yeah.
you could dig that out
Yep.
right here and form that little trail and shove the fuel over to here.
Bingo.
Then you could bring that in, lay that back, and it would move that over there. It's just the opposite of what you think. You would think if you wanted to move that over here, you'd lay that back.
Lay it back. That's what I'm thinking.
It
Yeah.
doesn't.
Okay.
You push
Okay.
this forward to move it over. Now, you're only going to move it maybe 200, 250 thousandths. But was there another way I can help this situation? What causes this situation? No airspeed, no signal.
Yeah.
There's no airspeed over there. It's dead, so it can't pull fuel, right?
Makes sense. Yep.
So
So then I think, do you work with a short turn on there then?
what you would do is bring that chamber in there. Bring that wall. This would all be for speed it up. If the wall's laid back too much and you don't have airspeed, you start bringing the wall in. And what you'll see is it'll start carboning up all the way into there and all the way to here. And you'll minimize that lean area. This is really, really powerful. I mean, to control that little lean spot right there. So you're only as good, you can only put so much timing and lean on that chamber as hard as it will let you. So if you could mix the air fuel mixture more, it gives you a lot more latitude on load and timing and everything else. So in this particular instance, let's say you had these cylinder heads and you pull high gear with a lot of chamber heat and it rattles, it detonates. And you don't know why. But it's burning the piston ring up right here. That tells you why.
Okay.
It's just lean right there.
But are you still going to lay that back though, like you said?
Say what now?
Going towards the plug, you said to lay that back and bring.
Yeah, actually I laid this back right here.
Yeah.
And bring this forward.
And do what you did on the far chamber side here, where you made it smaller to bring it in to get out the lead area. Okay. Okay.
And now we get to read different chambers. I tell people a lot that if you get a bench and you spend about 1,000 hours on it, you can pretty much park it and you don't need it anymore. Unless you're designing a new head you've never designed before. And then you use it. But you can read this just as well as you could the wet flow bench. And you see, look at this. We've got some color here. That is also an end cylinder. So this is a single 4-barrel.
Yep.
So the outside runners are leaned in. They're usually too long. And I'll show you a manifold here in a minute why that happens. This happens. But also you see it's concentrating it almost all on the exhaust side right here.
Yeah.
This one's a little more dispersed, even.
Mm-hmm.
But you also, let's read that chamber. See how that is a matte finish and this is wet?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is really, really rich. And that fuel is burning long after it should be completely done. This is why it's hot and it's leaving a lot of white residue there. And that is a real slow burn. It's so fat and so rich in these areas, but it's pretty complete. So you could lean on that cylinder with more timing. This one, you can see it's using the fuel. The color is lighter. It's like a matte finish. It's clean. So it's burning the fuel, but it also has that lean area. So if you put timing in that to burn it, you're probably going to detonate or may detonate that one. Run this one into a detonation scenarios. You're only as good as your leanest runner, your leanest chamber. You always have to compensate. So the idea is to try to get them all even, of course, and not compensate anything.
Well, they do individual cylinder timing then too. I mean, then you could start thinking about that, right? For that.
When it comes to individual cylinder timing, tuning individual timing curves, fuel curves, whatever, from cylinder to cylinder, if you're trying to band-aid a problem, you can end up chasing your tail.
Yep. Okay.
Because what you do to one cylinder affects all the others. It's like changing an air bleed in one barrel of a carburetor. Well, you've changed the signal to that, and that just uniformly changes the signal over all of them. It's the same on the cylinder.
Okay.
So if you're trying to band-aid a problem, usually that happens if you're trying to band-aid a problem, like one real rich cylinder, so you add a lot of timing, well, now that burns a lot better, but now it's affected the cylinders next to it. So then you start going, okay, well, I need to take a degree out of that one and a degree out of that one. And pretty soon you're 5 to 8 degrees difference from cylinder to cylinder, and you're almost right back where you were to start with. So a gentleman came up to me at PRI, and he said that he had some problems with his engine, his manifold. What he had done is he'd taken the CID manifold, meant for real tall LS and Ford heads, and cut it off and put it on like a Windsor head. So the runners were too short, too big, too much taper, and a lot of other problems. But if you see here, you're looking at a difference in ratio from 16:3 to 10:3. 6 ratios difference. You're also looking at 10 here, 10 to 1 here. Color. Yeah. So here we have 10 to 1 going to 11, getting rich. We have 14 going to 16, 12 going to 13. So it's got a hole this has got a hole right in the middle. So why is it leaning out? It's because it's in a negative harmonic here. The runner's too short, and it's trying to come into the power band, and it's not in tune yet. So that's one thing that I looked at. Now, when he handed me this, I went, oh, yes, I got to get my hands on this thing. I can fix it. So the dip in the middle, and then the outer runners on these manifolds, this particular one, the middle short runners with the taper and everything was tuned to 85 to 9500. He doesn't run it that high. But the outers, cross-sectional area and length, were tuned from 7,500, not 70,000, 7,500 to 8,000. So there's a mismatch there. Mm-hmm. So you have 4 runners tuned up here and 4 runners tuned down here, and in the middle, they're not close enough together that they can come out of one into another. They're so split that they come out, go negative, and then positive again, which is what you see here.
Right.
This happens a lot on single planes. The old single planes were horrible. They had like 1,500 to 2,000 RPM split. What some people in the industry refer to as a split harmonic manifold. 4 runners are on this one, and 4 runners are on that one. So what this does is if all runners aren't of equal length and tuned perfectly, the power band, instead of looking like this, looks like this. It flattens it out.
Yep.
So that was my job, is to try to fix that. This was the manifold. Basically, it's a manifold out of the box. Here you can see he has a plate here that he cut the manifold, bolted the plate up there, and machined the manifold to fit. So that ended up shortening the runners more than it should have to tune that engine perfectly. So how do I make up for that? Well, I always say airspeed is your greatest equalizer. Mm-hmm. Airspeed can fix a lot of problems. So if I'm way too short here and I'm almost tuned good here, I can increase the airspeed in my center runners a lot, take the taper out, and get the airspeed up to get rid of that dip. And make those taper and make those run a little broader power band. So this is what it looked like when I was done. It's a shadow of its former self. So in 15 hours, let me see if I can see. Yeah, see this right here, this area was shaped like this. Mm-hmm. And it was all the way out here. So the air couldn't get back there, so they ran rich. And they got all this nasty wet fuel with no airspeed and out of tune. So it was a mess. It's bouncing all over the place. But anytime you have a manifold, a single 4 manifold, you have to give it a lot of area on the outside, more so than you think. And a lot of people will try to make it swoopy and like direct. You don't direct the air. You give it room to take its natural path. Anytime you try to make it aerodynamic and swoopy and you get in your CFD software and you look at this nice arc. No, not a nice arc. It comes straight off, and give it some room. Choose its own path. That will even out the end runners more than anything. I took off about 1.5 inches right here, and probably about 1/2 inch right there. And also, I lengthened these center dividers here another 1/2 inch longer than those. So what that does, instead of being right here in the middle, it forces the air to try to go out, increases the average length of that runner, and then I filled it to increase the airspeed, take the taper out. So what I did was I moved this in, moved that over. See if I can go back and see if I actually got a pick. Yeah, see how wide this is right here?
Yeah.
So what I did is I laid this all the way back to here. Just rolled it all the way back and then filled that up like there. So you can see how much fill I have. And this wall right here is radiused all the way. There's the apex of the radius right there. So that wall comes all, and then I filled the outer walls to get the airspeed and taper right. So he's going to dyno this thing soon. We'll find out. And by the way, this right here, that was completely shut off. The air actually had to come in and then out and around and try to get to that outer runner. And it just wouldn't do it.
How many hours do you have in something like that?
That was 15. I could knock that out in a day and a half.
Okay.
So this is the engine that I was referring to. And here's all the specs. Now I will say this is not the exact engine because this engine is used for a special class.
Yep.
And it's a special custom billet, one-off, bore space and everything else. So I can't even allude. So I've changed the specs, although the end result of these specifications are the same. I've changed them to protect the guilty.
Okay, makes sense.
So it's a 634 cubic inch motor, 11-inch deck, with a teeny tiny 4285 bore.
Wow.
With 632 cubic inches.
Yeah.
Now again, the power that you can get out of something, bore first, that's going to dictate my valve size. My valve size is going to dictate my airflow. My airflow is going to dictate my power band and how much power I can get out of this if I can make it efficient enough. But when you start doing this, everything changes. All the math changes. So it's a 5.5-inch stroke with a 4285 bore. 7-inch rod. Its rod ratio is 1.27. So we have piston speeds. Where did I put the piston speeds at? The piston speeds are like 7,800 or 7,100. Yeah, there they are. Piston speed, 63 to 7,200 feet per minute. So where an unlimited engine would go through the traps right there, this thing's torque peak is there. And of course with over rev, you're going to go through the traps like this at almost 8,000 RPM. Or try. Mm-hmm. These engines that are under valve like this don't like over rev. They're dying as it is. The power band, all you're trying to do is hang on to as much torque as you can. Because with a normal engine, the power curve would look like this. Better yet, let me draw the torque curve instead. So the torque curve on a normal engine goes like this. So peak torque would be like this. This is the torque curve on that engine. It can't move air into the engine. It's falling quickly. So down here you can see the CFM potential. By the way, this has 1, and it'll probably have 1.5 soon. Why would you put that much lift in something? Because you don't have any valve size. And your piston speeds are stupid fast, and your rod ratio makes it even stupidly faster. So filling that cylinder as the engine speed gets higher and your time to fill the cylinder gets less and less, gets immensely harder. So the piston speed, 72. Operational piston speed, yeah, on track at 66 to 7,700. Now put that in context. This isn't the fastest piston speeds out there. Extreme Pro Stock and Pro Mod engines, some of those, they've lowered the engine speeds on a lot of the Pro Mod engines, and they're operating them closer to their peak VE, which has turned out to be the way to do it. But early on we were hitting 8,500 feet per minute mean piston speeds, and it's hard to keep anything together. The G loads, the kinetic energies in the crankcase are ridiculous. So what it does is it takes your TBO and takes it down by about 65-70%. So you're freshening the engine up, new rods, new pistons, and everything else almost 5 times more than you would something with a lower piston speed and a better rod ratio. I mean, you're trying to shove the piston out the side of the bore. The cam gross lift, let's see, 22943. Yeah, that is not right. I actually left some of this in there. Oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah, it's a 2290. Let me make sure I got that right. Ignore this. This is from something else.
Okay.
Feel that. The intake valve is 2335.
Yep.
So that gives me 4.28 square inches. The valve bore ratio is 54.5. So my valve area is 54.5% of that bore. And that's about as much as you can do in any cylinder head. Why do I consider that max? Because when you make the valve bigger, the efficiency starts to drop. It gets harder and harder and harder as the shrouding increases to maintain the same efficiency of that intake system. So that's why. And also, you have to have an exhaust valve. I mean, you're not going to move the valve 200 off the bore wall and put a 2400 and have a 1-inch exhaust valve. I mean, you do have to get it out. So the flow potential. So how much can I make with this valve? I mean, this guy wanted to make 1,350 horsepower. That ain't happening.
Mm-mm.
So the flow potential at a half, it's about 370 CFM airflow. And at 800 lift, about 492. And at 1 inch, about 500. And about 1,425, it'll move about 510 CFM. Peak torque at 68, peak power 78, CFM potential with 1.450 lift, 1190 and 880 foot-pounds. Now, if I had a clean sheet of paper and I could do it the way it should be done,
right,
is the bore stroke ratio and the piston speed range, the engine would make 1,500 horsepower. If I could get the proper bore stroke ratio, get the proper valve size in there, and 1,025 foot-pounds of torque. So this undervalved, over piston speed, low flow potential engine is minus 338 horsepower and 145 foot-pounds of torque because it doesn't have the valve area to feed it, which is why we have that 1,450 gross lift cam. And of course you have to have 68, 75 millimeter cams pull this off because you're slapping the valve open basically as fast as you possibly can because that piston is moving down the bore so fast it's almost impossible. It's impossible to feed it.
But that bore is the big limiting factor, isn't it? 285.
Yes.
I mean, come on,
Yes.
that's a big problem right there.
You look at the big picture. The big picture is I want to end up at 6,000, 6,300 feet per minute mean piston speed through the traps. Okay, so what bore stroke ratio and over square and valve size will fit in order to accomplish that task? But like extreme pro stock, you know, first it was 800, 850, 900. So why would you keep adding stroke when you're limited on bore? Because the engine's efficiency takes a horrific nosedive. And the more stroke you throw at it, the worse this situation gets. So why would you go from an 800 cubic inch motor to a 900 cubic inch motor just with stroke and make it even more inefficient and lower the engine speed even more. Because it still makes more power. It just makes less power per cubic inch. It's less efficient.
Right.
So for that added 100 cubic inches, you should be making 200 more horsepower, but you're only getting about 50 out of it.
Yep.
That's why. They keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And then again, let's look at the flip side of that coin. As the piston's rod stroke, all that mass gets larger, and power, I think, is to the cube root of the size. Meaning, a little Cox motor could make, 10 horsepower per cubic inch. But if you scaled that up, it would be lucky to make half that. As you start, let's say we have an 800 cubic inch, it's completely undersquare, doesn't have enough valve area. So let's design it to where we do. Well, you'd end up with a 500-600 bore space, a longer engine, shorter stroke, but a longer crank, which is going to flex more, a heavier piston, because now you have the proper bore stroke ratio, you can wind it up. So now I'm trying to wind it up with a heavier piston and a flexi flyer crankshaft and a camshaft that's long. See, it's like a boxer engine, a Porsche boxer engine, perfect example. They have a second, third order harmonic and a rocking moment. Okay, so when both pistons are opposing each other, but when the crankshaft throws are in the middle, it's also a rocking moment on that engine. So that's induced vibration. You know, you can only build those so big before you can't control the vibration anymore. So if you tried to make a 500 cubic inch Porsche engine, it would shake itself to bits. Yeah. There's only a certain range of size that you could put up with that much vibration. 4 cylinders are, as a matter of fact, Larry Morgan raced that Fiero in Comp Eliminator, or in Superstock. Yeah, it was Superstock. And he was literally having to weld the flex plate to the crank.
Really? Like a 2.5?
I'm sorry, weld the bolts to the flex plate. Yeah. He's welding the bolts to the flex plate.
Because it was shaking.
Otherwise, he wouldn't make it to half track before that thing would come loose.
Yep.
That's it.
It's just amazing.
Questions?
I mean, God. We got 131 people here. We've been talking for 49 minutes, which is great. Everybody's got a conversation going on here. So we're going to kind of go backwards and we'll find out who's here and what questions we had. And one of the first questions that we had, which was kind of may go back to what we were talking about, Jamie Brown asked, Darin, general question on plenum volume. When a larger plenum volume is required, in what situations do you choose to go deeper height, and when do you go wider carb padded walls? I should put that up. Sorry, guys.
I think I understand what you're trying to ask here. That can't be answered. It's engine specific, number one.
Okay.
And as far as depth is concerned, you can most definitely be too shallow. And if it's not at least 5.5, and for like a unlimited NA engine, pro stock engine comp, 6 inches,
6, 7,
5.5 would be my cutoff. And the wider it gets, the deeper it has to get. You know, short runners, they're far apart. So you make the floor flat and start jacking that up, and then you have to use what's called stuffers, which take the dead area out. So you have a plenum with sidewalls, and then it's 45 degrees, let's say, down here, and your runners, well, you need 6 inches here, and that increases your volume considerably.
Right.
So on a lot of manifolds, I will lean this in, like this, which promotes pressure recovery out of the carb or out of the throttle body anyway.
Yep.
Or if you already have one, you already have this plenum, you can make wooden pieces, triangular pieces, and put them in there. Call them stuffers. So now you shrink it up, you've got your depth, and the air can flow out. And normally, let's see if I can. Also, you need runner separation and isolation. You can't have that runner see any wall, not even close. So if you have a wall and your runner is shooting off here, you should have at least a 1/2 inch, and I put about 0.650 clearance from where that radius is to that wall. And it shouldn't be within more than a 1/2 inch, and I'll put 1 inch, try for 1 inch away from any runner. And on the sides, if you're looking down into the plenum, 50 off the side wall and 650 off the floor or off the roof. The floor itself can be dead even, which I prefer. I see a lot less problems with cylinder to cylinder variation, but some people will do it like that and then make the radius come in. It's not that detrimental to do that. And when you're trying to add plenum volume, you know, taking it down here and getting that like that and plenum depth, that can help in that situation. So again, it's engine specific. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I wish I could answer that a little more specifically.
Yeah, but overall, that's a good general answer. I mean, I think it helps a lot of guys get a good perspective on the plenum just from this right here. We'll kind of talk here. Let's see, we have here Caleb Mathis Performance. Good to see you here. Checking in. Excited to discuss a topic customers don't get. You're right. This is the stuff that customers don't get. So I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you being here.
Not only do they not get it, it's hard to get it across to them.
And even the guys here, some of us don't get it. I mean, I'm no professional. I thought that, and I saw Daniel Wilson mention in here that he thought that was fuel wash. I did too. When I first looked at that, I said,
so
that's
did I.
Me. That's what that
Everybody
is.
did.
You know, and now I've realized that I'm an idiot, but, you know, I'm not afraid
I
to
called
admit
it fuel wash for a decade.
Oh, okay. So you didn't know either. So, all right.
No. People think, oh, I'm so dumb. No, you're not so dumb. You're just observing what's there.
Yeah, but right now I can take I'll look, when we're done with this, I'll look at my own cylinder heads, and I'm going to look at the combustion chamber and look at everything, and I'll have a different perspective on it. And I guarantee 4 guys or 5 out of these people, 143 people, are going to do the same thing if they're not doing it already.
Good. And don't just read your chambers. Comp guys will pull a header all the time. And early on in Pro Stock, you'd pull a header. Why would you pull a header? To look at the burn in the exhaust port. That exhaust port will tell you so much. It'll also tell you if you have vortex generation, because there's going to be a fuel trail coming out the floor.
Yes.
And people think, oh, that's oil. No, it's not. It's a fuel vortex that's being eaten on intake or exhaust valve opening. That's what that is.
Okay. Charles, good to see you here. Thank you. There's a lot of guys here that are professional head porters. Charles, Chad Spires here.
I liked Chad's video. Chad, you did an awesome job. That was cool.
I'm telling you, he was kind of hesitant at first, a little trepidation when we started. But it's like,
yeah, I think he's a natural.
It is. Once you get into it.
He's just like me or you. We just like talking about what we do.
And I was telling him and the other guys, like, we'll finish this chat, and then we've sat here and talked for another 2 hours on stuff and gone over specifics. It's like,
oh yeah.
Do we ever get tired of talking about it? I don't know, but we do.
Yeah, I get tired, but I never get tired of talking.
Yeah, but I'll be like, oh, look at this, Darin. What do you think about this? And then we'll talk another hour on this something. I don't know. It's crazy. But here's a guy, let's see, from, don't ask me how to pronounce that, but he's from Norway. It's good to see you, Nutbus. Thank you. 1 o'clock here. Now that's good. Looking forward to this live chat. Always learning a lot from this. And guys, awesome. No doubt about that. So make sure you like this And if you haven't sub, because this is what it's all about right here. Don Dodder, it's good to see you here. Thank you. We already talked to Mike Cranston from New Zealand. Another informative session. Thank you. Appreciate that. Eric says, good evening, Darin and Tim. Thank you for that. Pontiac 411 says, thankfully, I got a notification about this situation. So make sure you put on the notifications, especially the members, because we have a live chat that's going to be on the 28th. And I'm going to make that post. That'll be 6 p.m. Usually we do those at 6 p.m. on the 28th, unless we change it. That's why I haven't put it up yet. We have to talk about it and make sure we're still good for that. So, good point. Don't forget nitrous on fighter planes, which was, I thought it was more on bombers. The Germans had it first.
Actually, it was part of the wartime, what they call wartime power package on many aircraft. I mean, that was the first time nitrous was ever used, was in fighter aircraft.
Who did it? Did the Germans initiate it? Do you know?
I don't know who did it first, but I know it was on a lot of aircraft, and I hate to name some aircraft, but you could only hit it at high altitude.
Yep.
When
full power,
the supercharger pressure was inadequate.
Okay.
So I forget how much horsepower. It depended on the engine and where they were at. But
let's see what we have here. I don't want to miss anybody. A Redline Engine Shop. It's great to be part of something with so much knowledge available to use as an engine builder. So grateful. Thank you, guys. You're welcome. You know, like I said, there's a lot of professionals here, and we appreciate that. Definitely.
You know, there was one thing, nitrous on a supercharged engine. You know, for the last 40, 50 years, people were just scared to death to use nitrous on a supercharged engine. And an unsupercharged engine, you can put 200 shot to it. It'll live forever.
Yeah.
As long as... And on a supercharged engine with 2 atmospheres, you could put 400 to it. And 3 atmospheres, you could put 600 to it.
6, yeah.
And it will be the same. It's proportional to the overall volume. You could shove nitrous down their throat. It's the same thing. You just don't over volume the thing. And it cools the charge.
I think who's probably, you know, I wonder if Musey gets involved with any of that nitrous application. You know, he's more just nitrous versus, you know, power adder stuff. He doesn't really care for the power adder stuff and pro mod stuff. You know, he's always bitching.
I don't know where the nitrous deal's going. I mean, it's been, quote, dead twice already and come back to life. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Back when we first started, everybody was saying, when the supercharged cars got in, started getting, everybody says, nitrous dead, we can't make any more power. Well, there was no technology in that class. None. Zero. So we all looked at each other and said, oh man, we can kick their ass. And then proceeded to blow shit up and eat our words for the next year until we learned what we were doing.
So Bart donated $15. Thank you, Bart. Any money that gets donated goes to Darin for this. He's got the 300 Ford 6-cylinder. He says, can you illustrate what the shape of a high Mach index short turn should look like compared to a more standard short turn? Low port 300 Ford, strip street E85, peak horsepower target at 55 to 6 grand.
Okay,
can you reach
I don't think you should use a high Mach port in that, but I'll show you what they look like.
Is the RPM range too low for that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You've got to have big gas speeds twice as fast as that. Well, not twice as fast. That would be probably 220 feet per second mean gas velocity, and then something that actually could utilize a high Mach port would be 300, 310, 315 average airspeed in the whole intake tract. Or like a Formula One deal, 335, 330.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when, like an undervalved engine, you're trying to get as much out of that intake tract as you can, but the engine is demanding 100 CFM more than what that can flow. That's where a high Mach index port belongs. When you have surpassed where you can operate the engine. So when the Pro Stock guys tried to turn 11,000 and they still only had the same size valve, that's what they were doing, was that. And all you're trying to do is design a port to handle those higher air speeds and not nose over as much as it did before. It's not a magic bullet. You're just hanging on to that torque as much as you can. So instead of the engine losing 25, 30 horsepower at 695 feet per second, it does that now at 720.
Okay.
So, but a high Mach index port, a normal port, let's just, I'll do let's say,
I'm going to take that down,
floor,
Bart, so we can see.
floor. Yep. Let's see the floor. Let's say we have a 10-degree down floor. That's a negative. That's down. And we'll have a 16-degree roof. So that's a 6-degree convergence to the short side, which looks like that. So what you're doing is you're taking the short side out of it, because the short side, that airspeed right there forms a choke. You can't navigate that. You can't turn air and keep increasing the airspeed over the Mach choke limit. You got to get rid of it. So that's what it is. But how are you going to make that flow as much as the port did before? Because you still have to have the airflow to make the power. So, on like F1 or 4-valve stuff, it's just as 2 straight tubes going right to the seat. But they do the same thing we do. If like you look down a super stock Hemi, that is the epitome of a high Mach port, because the short side, you have the bore here. Oh, God dang it. You have the bore here. The valve is here. So, as that valve opens, it just sees that bore as a continuation of the short side. So you could lower these almost down to nothing, because you still have pressure recovery as the valve opens, where in any other situation you don't. So what we do, and you're hurting on area. So a Hemi port, let's see, a 45-degree valve would be about right there. So a lot of the Hemi ports, they're low. They'll come in about right there. So what you could do is you could have a short side like that. Or what we do is I'll come out here like this and turn it and shoot it straight up and fill that whole thing in right there. So I made that whole area smaller. But if you look at it, looking down the port, you have your valve. The port would look like this. So it's really wide. It's not really that much, but it's more like that. So it's really wide at the floor. Again, the short side is going to form your primary choke before the valve. You have to give it enough area right there to flow the air that the valve can handle and able to handle higher airspeed. And it can't handle higher airspeeds if the short side apex airspeed exceeds about 320. So it's really, really, really hard to make them work. But once you do, it's freaking magic. So where a short side like that versus that versus that. So let's just say that green one right there, that's going to nose over at about 7,500 RPM. And the blue one, that thing will go to 8,500 RPM. And the red one, that's about a 10,000 RPM port. It can handle the higher airspeed. So if you're going to move the power band up, the short side goes down. The abruptness of the short side, it's airspeed. Where here, for a lower RPM engine, I'd have 365 to even 380 to make it really reactive feet per second. Where on that one, say moderately high engine speeds, that would probably be right about 350. And that one would be about 320. So as you do this, of course, the roof comes down with it.
That's what I was going to ask. So the roof is going to come down lower as you go higher RPM.
Yep.
Still maintain that shape, triangulated shape.
Now, if you were stuck with this, and there are heads out there that are stuck with this, it's like, how do you wind this up? I mean, how do you get more RPM potential out of something like that? When the apex speed, here, I'll redraw it. There's spread port heads. There are heads out here like this, by the way.
Yeah.
And your water jacket's right there. You can't lay it back. You can't do anything with it.
Work with a roof.
Yeah, and it's 400 feet per second. Let's just say it's just stupid fast. It's going to nose off way before it hits the power peak. How in the hell are you going to do that? You make it bigger right there. There's spread port heads you can almost put your fist in it. And early in the 90s, that's the way we thought we had to, well, we had to do it that way. Everybody thought that was the proper way because that's the only heads and way we could accomplish the task.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was, if you had like a modern day port that brings the apex back and up, so the green port looks like that, and the red port
needs to be wider at the bottom.
Looks like that.
Yep.
You have to increase the cross-sectional area here because that airspeed's so damn high.
Mm-hmm.
Still going to nose over. It might gain you about 500 RPM, but it also has the added effect of making the port less efficient. So what you're going to see is that's going to gain more torque, and it's not going to be able to hang on to peak power. And it'll nose over a lot faster. So where this would operate to 8,500, this will probably be lucky to hit 7,500. And where this could over rev to 9 grand, that thing ain't going to make it to 8,200 before it's just done. Now, how do you see that? BSFCs. You can see it in the BSFCs. You can see it in the dyno. What happens is the fuel flow will spike, BSF speeds will spike, and the power will drop because the signal is phenomenal.
Okay.
Next question.
So this is from G. Isaac. Thank you for donating $19.99. I'm late, so going to beginning. I have headaches. So he must say I have some heads that Darin did a while back. I will send them to him soon. Thank you for the information, gentlemen. So I'm not sure who G. Isaac is, but thank you. We appreciate that. I thought he had a head, but now I see what he was saying. So perfect.
Heads, headache, same thing.
Yeah. See, aren't they? Sometimes they are, I bet, when you think about it. Pontiac 411 says the exhaust pad relief is something David Vizard has talked about, as it also gives the exhaust gas a better path out of the valve as you approach TDC and the exhaust stroke. That I can't say. Yes, no?
Okay, the exhaust pad relief. Oh, the quench pad relief
Yeah.
there. David
Yeah.
has talked about it. Also gives the exhaust gas better path out of the valve as you approach TDC. Well, yeah, it would. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
It seems like a little pathway for that to go.
Yeah, well, people take situations and they don't think of it all the way through its dynamic process. So you'll look at a dome and you'll look at a chamber, and nobody really knows how to look at those two together. And that's where there is a sweet spot, a real finite sweet spot, where the chamber volume and valve depths will match up just perfectly with a dome and very little valve relief, to where you have almost an even area across the combustion chamber. The burn rate will go up, more homogeneous air-fuel mixture burn, everything gets better. But people will mill the cylinder heads more than that, sending the valve reliefs down into the piston. And if you took molds as you do that, you'll find that as you get out of that sweet spot, you usually got to run more timing, you have more air-fuel separation, you can get a that makes the chamber more detonation sensitive. You can't get the fuel mod. The sweet spot on like a small block Chevy Pro Stock deal is about 42 cc's, but people will try to take them down to 35, 38. It doesn't sound like a big jump, but it is. It sends your valves down in there. Now you have all these sharp edges everywhere. Yep. Nothing's uniform. And if you took a mold, you'll find that there's two combustion chambers, and it's pinched off in the center instead of harnessing every bit right over that spark plug. That's the name of the game, right there. Take the molds, look at it, squeeze it, add material, shove it to the center, and get it even. If you look at a Hemi, primary example, you have this nasty hemispherical combustion chamber, and on a super stock Hemi, the valve releases are set. You can't mess with them. So all you can do is the dome itself will actually touch at high RPM right here. It won't carbon up. And then it starts to pull away and it goes flat.
Yeah.
So what you're doing, starts to pull away and then goes flat. What you're doing is you're using this to shove the air-fuel mixture, force the air-fuel mixture to the center as it comes up, and your spark plugs, well, on those, it's over here, but now you've harnessed that right there. You can't believe what they do for power and top end when you start being able to optimize this and just start chopping that off and bringing that tighter and tighter and tighter and shoving it closer and closer to the plug. It's like magic power.
Really?
Yes. I mean, there's between a good piston design and a bad piston design, you're probably looking at about 25 horse on one of those engines.
Well, like you were saying about that Chevy, I think of like a Ford Yates head. Those combustion chambers are small, 35, 38 cc's. They're made to be that small. That's where that...
And they were originally designed for 750 gross lift.
Yeah.
So their valve release aren't near as deep as some drag racer that tries to shove 1-inch lift at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Tom says he's got a question here. He says, I'm using a set of CHI 225 CC3V heads mean cross-sectional area is 2.4 on a 12.5 to 1, 406 Cleveland, 4-inch stroke, 4020 bore. Max RPM 7,500. Can this head MCSA support 700 horsepower with a max of 7,500?
You don't ask easy questions, do you?
I would say, yeah.
All right. They say never do math on air. Screw it.
I wish the bore was a little bit bigger, Tom.
You haven't given me a valve size, did you? No. Give me a valve size.
You're talking to me?
So it's a
215.
The guy who just asked. It's a 406, so I'm taking it's at least 4165. So
It's probably like a 215, 165 or something.
we'll give him. Oh, it's a 4020 bore.
Yeah, I know. That 10 thousandths does make a difference.
So the maximum valve you're going to fit in there is a 4020 bore. 2-1 with a Yates head. They're close. So a 2080, a 2100, maybe a 2125. We'll just say 2125 since he didn't give me it. Let's just push it.
I mean,
So-
to me, just
I need to know the valve size, so I'm estimating valve size
Yeah.
of 2125,
yep.
which
Let me
is 3.546 square inches. Let's see what a 2180 is. 2180 is 3.732, and that'd be the most you're going to get in that thing. 12.5 compression. I wish I knew your cam lift and everything else, so I'm going to be shooting blind on that. MCSA is 2.4 square inches. Woo. And let's see, 7,500. So 406 times 7,500.
Hi, Izzy.
4 cube divided by 8. Okay, 372. So the engine is going to require an airflow of around 370 CFM at 7,500 RPM in order to efficiently make the most horsepower per cubic inch that it possibly can. And you have 2.4.
It's quiet. We could hear a pin drop now.
Yeah. The answer to that question is I need to know your cam lift. It's a low compression. I'm taking your 700 horsepower. Ooh, 700.
I'd say, yeah, I could do it.
$700 horsepower requires about, is that right? 700.
Queen Izzy.
About 300 CFM airflow. It's not a lot to make only 700. The problem is, I don't know
Those
your
heads are
lift,
like
but
340. Those heads full
getting
340.
2.4 square inches to 7,500. That would be quite a. But if the engine's inefficient enough and restricted enough, I mean, you should be able. That's really, really small. I'm almost thinking you're going to choke off, or you can even flow enough air to make that much horsepower. But you could. I mean, it's. I would have to think about that one some more.
I thought they had bigger cross-sectional area, like 3 inches or something, but that's
Yeah.
that's what I
3.5.
yeah.
Yeah, mean gas velocity on something like that at 7,500 would probably be about,
You guys just talk amongst yourselves.
yeah, well, that would, you're almost square on velocity and flow. That's weird. Yeah, 2.4. Barely.
Barely?
I said,
Okay.
if it does it, it's just barely.
The port
I-
needs to be bigger.
Huh?
Port needs to be
It-
bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And see, I don't know what manifold or anything else is on this thing.
Probably like
2.4 is really, really small.
All right, we'll hold that thought, Tom. You can always put more information in on the down there, and we'll see if coming back. But it's going to be pretty close to that. Queen Izzy, good to see you here, guys. Thank you for saying hi to Izzy. Appreciate that. Thank you for showing up and learning. Force Fed's back. He says he donated $20. Thank you very much. He said Darin and a Profiler big block Chevy 9.8 deck tunnel ram or the new Edelbrock tunnel ram, both with removable tops on the single 4500 umbrella top. Would it take a lot to tune outside / inner runners?
No. No. Very little.
There you go.
Now the profiler on a 9.8 deck, I mean, you know that thing's tuned from 7,000 on up. So the Edelbrock has a longer runner and it's tuned 1,000 RPM lower than that. So you have to take that into account too. All the manifolds that I designed while I was for the average racer. 7,500, 7,800, 8,000 absolute max power. Or
Right.
RPM, I should say.
Yeah. Back. Thanks, Force Fed. We appreciate that. Now, this is an interesting question here and an interesting name. Dogface, 3437. Darin, do you have any experience with mini pulling tractor stuff?
Yeah. Long time ago. Kohlers. Yeah. Welding
Now,
brazing the cylinders in there. Ended up with 1-inch plate on the top, 1-inch plate on the bottom, and 4 9/16 studs holding the damn engine together so it wouldn't blow apart. Yeah. Yeah, been there.
now I've seen these, but they have regular full-size engines on them. I've seen some.
Yeah,
of these.
they've come a long way since I mean, this was
Is that what you mean? Dogface, let us know.
actually my wife's ex-boyfriend came in the shop. It's a funny story with my wife, but
Yeah.
he came in here and he asked me for my help, and he had a dyno in his garage and everything. And I was like, that sounds like fun. So I went over there and I helped him design different chambers and combustion chambers and played with cams, and it was kind of fun. I built, the 45-degree up, took some old titanium valves and turned them down for him. And yeah, I played around a lot, but that was a long time ago. They've come quite a ways since then.
Oh, yeah. It's crazy, man.
But the funny thing is she liked me. I wouldn't even acknowledge her presence because she was with someone else. So
Yep.
she thought I was stuck up. The funny thing is, this is a funny story.
Yep.
Everyone in the shop was sitting there talking about what their perfect woman would look like. And she walked through the front door. And I said, guys, come here. That is my perfect woman right there. And a year later, we were dating, and 2 years later, we were married. After she broke up with him, I called her the next day. I've been married 28 years.
How'd you get her number?
Oh, I knew it.
Oh, okay. I knew it. Caleb says, what does it mean when a single carb engine hates carb spacers?
Ah,
It has yellow fuel staining in the intake from Q16 at the end of the
16.
season.
Okay. Pay attention to your fuel staining. Pay attention to where that is falling out of suspension and staining. It will tell you a lot. Read your parts. And that is a book. The problem is how do you interpret it? And you'll see, and I've seen this so many times, as a matter of fact, the engine I referred to earlier had the problem I'm about to allude to. The runners were too long with too much taper. As that rarefaction wave traverses out that runner, if it sees an increase in area, I think it's over like 25% over so much distance, it will immediately split, turn around and go the other way, and send the other half out. So now this changes your harmonic tuning. And if you look down the runner and you see a fuel ring an inch down, that's where it's turning around and going the other way. Chop an inch off the runner, pick up 40 foot-pounds of torque, and a broader power band and more power. As a matter of fact, my brother used to get so pissed off at me for doing that. And I don't know. I used to go in the dyno and I would sit over the carburetors with a timing light, an adjustable timing light, and watch the booster signal as the engine pulled up. And stand on the side of the engine and look down the booster and watch that pulse come out the freaking runner. See if it's tuned. Watch it. Just watch it. It'll tell you. But people are like, oh, you can't be in there. Screw you. My brother and I get pissed off at each other. And, you know what's kind of funny? When you're riding a Pro Stock engine and you're looking at the booster signal, your eyes have a harmonic. About 88, 9,000, it'll blur out. Your eyes will vibrate and just completely blur out, and then come back in about 9,500.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, the old Jaguar 6-cylinder inline road race engines, we did those back in 91. And I used to take an adjustable timing light and look at them with the Webers and then see where it was and slide the slider until it was tuned and race it.
So you think there's more than any kind of spacer is going to do to help that?
Okay, what does it mean when a single carb engine hates carb space? Hates. Power goes down. Well, that would depend on what the fuel signal does in regards to the power. Where the power hurts the most, is it escalating or degrading? In other words, does it hurt more the engine speed goes up or less? And I would observe all that and write it down and then try to formulate some idea what's going on. Could be a plethora of different things.
I will tell you this, I run Q16 and it does stain the intake.
And where it stains the intake, it's trailing.
Okay.
It's trailing. I had on this wet flow bench that I had, I had a Spreadport Raptor cylinder head poured from clear acrylic. I have the pictures of it. So I completely blew the whole part, machined it all the way, so all I was looking at was the port.
Yeah.
And I could look at that port, you could see the trails, where the trails were, and believe me, on every wall there's fuel trails, and on the floor, it's horrific. They're just sitting there crawling along.
So all intakes can have that.
Yeah, all of
right?
them.
Okay.
Yeah, even fuel injected engines have some wet flow up top, depending on where the injector is. That shit gets spit back out, especially below peak torque and above peak power. When you're out of tune, you're not on the pipe.
Yeah.
So it's going to spit everywhere. So what does it mean if your hates carbs. It could just be that you have more enough plenum volume. It could be that simple.
That it doesn't need
And
it.
a lot, what?
That it doesn't need any spacer.
Yeah, does it need any? And what type of spacer are you using? Because
Right.
if you're using the ones that protrude down in the plenum or more than a half inch, oh God, that could cause all sorts of problems. I don't use them. I don't like them. In some instances, they're a decent band-aid. But in most cases where you have sufficient plenum volume, not a good idea.
Okay. Pontiac 411 says, when trying to equalize runners, are you using a velocity probe to show you slow or fast areas?
Yes. The general or mean or average airflows are calculated. The instantaneous velocities anywhere in the system, yeah, are measured, absolutely, everywhere.
Okay. Marano Leon from Argentina. Good to see you here. In the case of different lengths of the runners, can you make it up?
Yes, to some extent.
Made different cam duration in the same cam and make the cylinders tuning in different RPMs.
Yep. Yes, you can. You can. And again, it's a band-aid. You're trying to solve an inherent problem in the system instead of designing around that problem and making it correct. But yeah, you definitely split duration cams end to end. Yeah, NASCAR was doing that 40 years ago.
Dang. All right, Marano, thank you. Opar Chris says, love what you guys are doing here. Thank you guys for making this information so easily accessible.
I'm glad you enjoy it.
As we do too. So thank you, Opar Chris.
It's like I say so often. When I was younger, nobody would tell me shit. Nothing. Zero. I mean, if you walked up to somebody in the pits and asked them any of the questions you guys are asking me, they would laugh and walk away.
Or they may just walk away.
As a matter of fact, I haven't told this story in public. In 2000, I started doing the Rear Morrison engine building class. And then that expanded. Yeah. I expanded that into the engine building and induction class, kind of split off. And we were going to Ford plants and Chevy plants and doing that deal. But for the hardcore racers, we brought it into Rear Morrison, 2-day class on the weekend. Then I started doing hands-on classes, which are some of the stuff like Chad went through and Bill Anderson went through. And I was able to hear, this is how it's done, and go kick them out the door, and then they rock and rolled all on their own. I just gave them the basics. What they have accomplished is they own all that. I know they give me a lot of credit, but I just told them where to look and how to look at it. And, now I lost my train of thought. Oh, the school. Nobody would tell me anything. And when I started the school, I got threats. When I went out, when I did the Australian class in 2002 or 4, I forget when it was, I flew to Australia and I did a class for 65 of the top engine builders in Australia. I came home to death threats on my phone.
Wow.
So if you guys think that what I'm talking about is super secret, it's not. It's just math and physics and experience. But these guys hung on to that. That's how they made their living. And I was screwing with them. They were pissed off. You know, it's like I worked my ass off, and I can understand. They worked their ass off for decades to learn this, and I'm just telling everybody about it.
I bet there's still people that are pissed if they see us on YouTube or whatever and hear you talking about it.
I haven't gotten any of that in probably a decade, because everything has come full circle with YouTube and the internet and everything else.
No doubt.
And, you know, it's kind of stupid, in my opinion, to learn all this and have all these experiences and not pass it down onto other people who can carry the torch.
Right. And really, how many serious headquarters are out there? You know,
50?
yeah, I was going to say 50,
I mean,
100 maybe. I doubt that in the U.S.
I mean, since NASCAR fired them all,
Yeah.
it's like, I knew the NASCAR downscaled everything. They wanted to take the welfare approach to racing. Let's try to make everybody even. Let's just make it a driver's game.
Yeah.
I have one reply to that.
There it is.
Because you're killing competition.
Right.
That's why we got into this. And it's not about competing against everybody else. It's competing with that engine to make more power, make it last longer. We're competing against ourselves. I'm not a driver. I'm not a racer. I never had an inkling to drive a car. It's that engine and how it propels that car. And that's my entire life. But the competition is why we're in it. Yes, I understand. We were costing them millions and millions of dollars, having to update their engines and keep up with the technology that we kept handing them. And Joel DuBose tells the story about the GM guys telling him that he was costing them billions. That's competition. If you don't like the fire, get out.
Get out. That's it. Speaking of fire, Chad's here, Spire. Darin and I had the manifold conversation when I built mine for the super stock engine. The depth was my concern. I just got lucky and it worked.
You're better off having it a little too tall than too short.
Yep.
Too short will kill you. You make that floor too reactive, it's going to cause airfield distribution problems. And that's another thing. It's like if you have runners coming out your floor, you have to believe after hundreds of manifolds and going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So you have radius right here. This is a flat floor. Okay. So this manifold, these are pretty tall runners. That air-fuel ratio, or that air-fuel mixture, when it comes in, this is a natural kind of a dead area. It's going to set up for the high velocity area. But sometimes people will try to do that. That's a mistake. I have never, not once, seen that function properly. For some reason, there's a mismatch from here to here. You're increasing the length here. And you would think, well, hell, that's just going to direct the air better into the runner. But yeah, it makes sense, right? Doesn't work. This is one of those things that no matter what your theory is, when you try it and it doesn't work, it's like, I'm not going to do that again. So then you go ahead and do that again, just to make sure that what you were seeing was actually what you were seeing. And then you do that in a single plane. You do that in a single plane manifold, and it's FM, freaking magic. It's perfect. It works great. You'll see all the manifolds that I design for single plane manifolds are like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or like that. With a break right there. But if you do that with a 2-4 2-carbureted sheet metal manifold, it'll skew. I have seen it throw a 10 to 15 pound per hour fuel dip somewhere in the curve because it interferes with the signal. I don't know how. It just does. Just did every time I tried it. So I don't do that no more.
Live and learn, baby.
It's one of those things where, yeah, you could research that to your death. I've tried it 4 or 5 different ways. Every time it's failed, I don't do it anymore. It's like, people ask me, it's like, how do you know that the math and everything you do works? That that's the right way to do it? It's simple. If I do the math tells me to do this, and I do this, this, and this, and the result is a world record or the fastest engine out there, I was right. If it's a total disaster, I was wrong.
Simple.
Simple.
Thanks, Bert, for joining the membership. We appreciate that. Knowledge is power. Thank you so much. There's a lot of videos to go through. I'm putting up a new video soon for the members of Darin porting, so that'll be up. Thank you. Jamie says that one guy, Caleb, asked a good question on spacers. I've had an engine that loved a 1-inch open spacer but hated a 1-inch 4-hole taper.
Every situation is different,
Mhm.
and people, including myself,
Yeah.
want those easy answers to draw a pat conclusion that covers a broad range of engine applications. It just doesn't work that way at all. Each engine, I always say this, each engine is its own animal, and you got to tame that son of a bitch the way it wants you to or forces you to. So if you have a single 4-barrel that likes a 4-hole spacer, you're going to come across many engines that don't with the same manifold because of the different design aspects, the heads and everything else. So when it comes to spacers, I always tell people, I can't tell you what spacer is going to work. I can tell you what spacers work better or worse in certain instances or situations, but I can't tell you what you need for that engine with that cam at that engine is this spacer. Manifold tuning, a lot of trial and error.
That's it. And they're cheap for the most part, so you can
They are.
probably have a drawer of them. So
I worked for a decade on spacers. I've tried every single one. You have to remember I was sequestered in the Pro Stock and Comp realm, unlimited NA engines. So I noticed that as the plenum got bigger, it wanted less and less lengths. The closer I got to the floor, if I had an issue, sometimes I could go from a half to like 750 and it would help, but only on that manifold that had that problem with that engine.
Not universal.
That's why you'll see professional engine builders, you go into some of these guys' dynos, they got a plethora of spacers all over the wall. Like, yes, we've got every spacer you can think of. And run them across the engine, note the differences, it'll tell you what it wants. And Tony's a master at that because he has lots of experience.
Yeah.
A lot of these different manifolds, you go, oh, well, that manifold wants that spacer, that one wants a 650, only a half, and that's exactly what they want because he's been there, seen it, done it.
Yep. Saves a lot of time on the dyno. You know what I mean? Without a doubt. Eric says, Darin, did you work on some SB 2.2 heads for the winner of Sick Week at NASBC?
I don't know.
There it is. That was an easy one.
A lot of SB2s, but unless the customer tells me,
like this
I have never signed a cylinder head. I shouldn't say that. I've signed about 2 or 3 sets because the customer asked me to. Early on in my career, the people that were around me in Pro Stock, my father and everybody else, was like, if you want a friend, get a dog. If you want respect, you're in the wrong game. Those guys are your enemies, not your freaking friends. And that's the way it is in Pro Stock, still to this day. It's shake my hand, knife behind the back. Don't think it ain't. But trying to formulate this
diplomatically. Yeah. What was I talking about right before? I freaking Spacers, you mean?
Yeah, the spacers. So I made these spacers and they cured all of our problems. Isolator spacers.
Okay. Yeah.
And somebody else saw the spacers and started buying and using them. On many of the pro stock teams had bought them. And by isolator, I mean you have 7-degree like this. It comes down. So these are hanging out in space.
Mm-hmm.
So as the air comes in here, it forms low pressure. It's shooting past here, so it forms low pressure vortexes in here. So when a refraction wave tries to act or out of tune, when it's below peak torque or above peak power, when it's not on the pipe, and the reversion signal tries to act, these low pressure areas catch that high pressure and will cut it down to almost nothing. And it broadens that power range out. So I got chastised for letting that out.
Really?
Let's say that. Yeah. Nobody talked to anybody.
But with those going down into the plenum, doesn't that affect it? Doesn't it hurt it though? If it's going down too far into the plenum? You know what I'm saying?
That's only a half inch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The spacer that I'm referring to was only a half inch, and these came out. That's a horrible, horrible drawing. And these came out like that. This is only a half inch thick. So if you try, all sorts of weird stuff happens when you try to extend that down into the plenum. It can cure a problem, but it usually initiates more problems than it causes, than it helps. Now, that's why I can't say what'll work. But those spacers, and they're still sold at Rare Morrison, they work on everything. There's not an engine that they won't work on. Now, that's what by work on, meaning they won't hurt power. They'll only help power. And to what extent they help power is directly proportional to how bad your intake system is. Okay. So I've had guys pick up 25 horsepower, which is insane. That's this huge red flag saying my induction system and cami and everything else is completely screwed up. That's what's that's telling me. Because if it gains more than 4 or 5 horsepower, and it'll broaden the power curve out. So it'll come on the cam sooner and leave a little later, which is what they should do. And if they don't do that, I'd start looking in other areas as well. So you can use them as a diagnostic, you know.
Using one right now from Rare Morrison.
Lends insight into what's going on in there.
Hi, Darin and Tim, watching here from the Philippines. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hope the weather's there. It's nice.
In the Philippines. Now, forgive my ignorance, but in the Philippines, they have the boat racing, the long boats, super fast boats, where they have the engine on a pivot. That looks like fun. If
Let us
you're
know
into
about that.
Huh?
I said Nuber 1582. Let us know about that. Comment about that. The only boats I've seen like that are in like Vietnam. You ever see those with like a?
And and you see those guys. They have tracer grinders. They make their tracer grinders, and they'll sit there and play with cam lobes.
Really?
I have a lot of respect for people that do that. Yeah, and then they'll take that master cam and set up multiple cams on these tracers and grind them and copy it. And that's the way my dad did it. Actually sitting hand grinding a master lobe about this big.
Really? Wow.
On a tracer, yeah.
Came a long way, baby.
Oh, God.
Let's see, he says, I found my people. I've never met another combustion chamber carbon reading nerd. Well, there you go. Welcome to the club. We're all learning it.
That engine is a book. It'll tell you most of its problems if you just read it.
Mike says, Darin, 23-degree Chevy NA, if the intake is 2.02, and ideally exhaust should be 1.46, 72.5% of the intake.
Not necessarily.
Yet the exhaust is actually 1.6. Is there a disadvantage to run exhaust throat at 90% of 1.46 on the 1.6 to maintain?
Okay. First off, I got to ask, where did you get 72.5%? That sounds like it was out of a book from the 1970s. Because we've learned that 70% is more than enough. And you can dynamically tune the exhaust, even though you need a larger one. 72. Okay. 72 was considered optimum. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to get more air in. So we will increase our intake valve area, move it off the bore wall, which shrinks the exhaust. So now we got to shrink the exhaust. So how to make the exhaust more efficient to get it out? We got it in, now we got to get it out. And it's basically, we shove the exhaust over to the bore wall and then mess with the combustion chamber to get it to flow smooth and silent with the largest throat we possibly can, and then develop the back angles on the valve for proper pressure recovery. So you can get away, 70% is more than enough. On all NA, unlimited NA engines, you'll find it's about 70. And the flow ratio, this is a size ratio, the flow ratio will be about 65, 68%. 70, you very rarely find that. So it's an area, when you're tuning exhausts, it's a different world, because when you're flowing an intake, you're flowing it at 1 psi relative to a 14.7 atmospheric. You're flowing it at 70, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So this transonic flow regime here is very close to what you see in the engine. But the exhaust, you can't mimic that on a flow bench. You can't design an exhaust port based off of flow bench data, meaning area, airspeed, and flow, like we do the intake. It's a completely different ballgame. And why is that? Because you got 500 psi relative to atmospheric. You've got a more viscous mixture that you have to flow, even though it's hot. It's a little, but its density is low. Everything turns on its head on the exhaust side. But here's the killer, the great equalizer. There's heat there. All the energy's there. You got heat and pressure. So you can capitalize on that heat and pressure and design the exhaust port to get everything out, meaning get the airspeed up and get as much area as you can and make it flow smooth and efficient, and have a nice divergent exhaust port that doesn't bend too much. And you can design it to get it out. But it used to be back in the 50s, 60s, you had to have like a 75, 78% size ratio.
Right.
And then in the 70s, 80s, it dropped to about a 72, and then now it's like 70. Because we've learned how to develop the ports at a higher efficiency, that flow at a higher efficiency.
Okay.
So basically what I'm telling you is don't put too much credence in size ratios.
There you go, Mike. Not sure. 723 says, question on some Ducati 4-valve motorcycle heads, the high Mach index port has a ski jump at the bottom of the short side radius rather than a small radius. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would have to see. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I have some theories of what they're trying to do, what their goal is. And on 4-valve stuff, it's tumble shot across the valve. And you don't want it flowing on the backside. A lot of times, you just want to cut it off and all go over the top. I'm sure there are multiple things involved in why they did that. And I really can't comment on anything. I would like to see the technical paper on that, if they have one.
Okay. Just like your name, not sure this time. Thank you.
I'm not sure. I would be speculating, theorizing, and I don't like that.
Rev Shed Performance. Good to see you here. Great stuff, gentlemen. Seeing Darin thinking hard about the maths doesn't make me feel so bad about how I wrestle with it some days. Hey.
Are you kidding? I wrestle with it every day.
And
My
doing it
problem is I keep forgetting. If I don't use it, I lose it. And I
Yep.
have a horrible memory. If anybody knows me, they'll tell you I have a horrible memory. And this is why I have file folders of everything that I have to go look back up. If I haven't used something in like a year, I can't remember it.
It comes with age.
Yeah, it's getting worse.
Yeah, tell me about it. So Ty says, so Darin, tell us your opinion on all the dished pistons and all the street stroker engines. Get the compression down.
Yeah. It's a way to get the compression down, but there are ways, my opinion is, there are ways to accomplish that task without completely destroying the squish quench area and mixture motion. And the NASCAR guys knew that 40 years ago, 35 years ago. So if you have a dished piston, sometimes what people will do is they'll just have this. Just a straight dish. And some semblance of quench area on the outside.
Yeah.
But the chamber is shaped like this. So that dish, this quench area, should be shaped like that. That's a way to lower the compression ratio down and still maintain your mixture motion and keep your chamber efficiency high. And also, if you use this on a supercharged engine, it can get you into a dangerous scenario, especially if your rings are high, because this is going to set up stress riser right there, and it'll pop the top right off the piston. Seen that many times. So this in structural rigidity, and you can bring in your quench area. Bring in your quench area to reduce that, or lower your ring out of the heat.
Yep.
What's the next question?
Well, here we go. When calculating airspeed in a plenum to determine radius on runner entry, do you use cylinder head flow or CFM demand? Loud exploder.
I try not to go under 220 feet per second at the opening in the plenum. And this is where people get into trouble trying to use taper angle. You don't size it off an angle. They're just angles that seem detrimental after a certain point. And I've talked about the 7 degrees per wall, 14 degrees included. And people say, okay, well, that's not a divergent region, so it doesn't have to be 714. It's the inversion. So why are you saying that? Because the refraction wave, that's why I'm saying that. Yeah, the incoming airflow doesn't see it. It sees the speed and the volume of that section. But the rarefaction wave that comes out, turns around, goes back to the plenum, does see it. And that's why I say not to exceed that. But that's not the size. That's just don't exceed that angle. 225 feet per second is about where I aim it. I've been down to 220. And once you start getting down to 220, that's when you start taking that 1/2 inch radius and shrinking it down to 1/4. So if you have no taper and you have a lot of taper, and this is over 8 degrees per wall, and it's very easy to do on a short runner. On a hard runner, you're never going to get there. But when your runner is only that long as opposed to that long, it's very easy to shoot too much taper in the system. So we have a short runner with a lot more taper. So right here, let's say it's 219 feet per second, which is a little too slow. So this radius right there would be like 1/4 of an inch. Because I have so much taper, I'm using that shear right here. The air will actually shoot off into the runner. So it also harnesses your signal more into the runner, and it forms a little fuel shear right there. It gets the fuel off the walls because it's too slow. Where something like this at 220 feet per second on a long runner, you could put a 1/2 inch radius on that thing and it wouldn't affect it at all. So again, depends.
Okay.
You know, in a lot of short runner stuff, so one of the problems with short runner stuff is on unlimited NA engines, half the runner is in the cylinder head. So what you see on the outside of the cylinder head looks absolutely huge. So for a low RPM application, you'd have a port come out here like this, and then you would have a really long runner coming off of there.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you have a runner this long? That's not going to work. So what you do is you carry this into the port and you move your choke down. So part of the runner is in the port. It's really, really hard to do. It's not easy. So long runners are easy. The higher the engine speed gets, you still have to maintain the same volume. So you start increasing your taper to get more volume, but now your airspeed gets low, and you have to form a fuel shear and have that 1/4 inch radius up there. And it's so damn short that the taper looks like this, so you've got to incorporate that into the port. 7,500, 8,000, 8,800, 9,000, easy. When you're making your torque peak at 9,500 and your horsepower peak at 11, it's an entire different ballgame.
Jesus. Don West says, have you ever hooked the flow bench to the exhaust port and set the valves at a predetermined overlap lift to compare cross flow between various heads?
The best thing to do is do that on the engine. You should hook the vacuum to the exhaust port and roll the engine over and measure that every degree from about 25 before, 25 after. That'll tell you. I did that for years. And you know what I learned? Absolutely nothing.
Well, there you go.
But what had the biggest impact was that sweet spot of chamber volume, valve reliefs, and harnessing as much area over the plug as you could to increase burn efficiency. That does more than anything for overlap flow and burn, because when the valve's open, it's a straight shot. And you will see that when you do that, you'll pick up power across the board, you'll pick up top end power, but you'll also have a power band. Instead of doing that, it'll do that. It'll carry.
Okay. McIntyre says, does a carburetor ever benefit from a hood scoop? Or does a carburetor do its best drawing from a low pressure zone?
The hood scoop pressure is relative to the speed of the vehicle, the opening, and the shape. Believe me, the Pro Stock guys have done tons of research on this. And you could get, depending on the design of the scoop, how it launches the air, how it turns the air, the shape of the opening, whether it's in dead air or clean air, or how much, where it's at, the airspeed that it sees on its face, it's very easy to have too big. When you have too much area, you don't see hood scoops this big reaching out to grab air, do you?
No.
That's because that's not the way it works.
Right.
You tune the hood scoop, and I have all the calculations to do that, because the land speed, the Spirit of Rhett that went 422 miles an hour with one engine on gas, shot of nitrous.
Nitrous, yep.
He hit the nitrous at 380 miles an hour. He hit the button. And then the last 2 miles went to 422. The opening of that hood scoop was 3 inches in diameter. Tiny. Because of the speed of the vehicle. The slower the vehicle, the bigger the scoop. But you're not going to attain anything over about 0.5 Hg, maybe 0.7 positive pressure. You can get some. But if you try to get greedy, you're going to set up buffeting. You're going to supercharge the back. And also you have to realize that the hood scoop design itself, as the front carburetor takes air, the pressure drops. So it has to shrink to maintain the same airspeed to the back. There's a ton of R&D done on hood scoops. But to answer your question, yes, they can benefit. And they could just as easily be hurt by that.
All right.
Best thing to do is instrumentize. Instrumentize everything. Get the transducers, one in the back, one in the middle, and one in the front. And on each side of the entrance. Maybe have 3 or 4. And then watch what happens. You'd be amazed at what happens. And on the EFI, the Pro Stock guys, on the first half of the track, they were supercharging the front. And on the back half, they're supercharging the back. So it flipped. It just depends on the design and what you're trying to do.
I mean, think about it. Those Pro Stock cars of today, I mean, they have that triangulated hood scoop. It's not this big. You know, it's small area-wise, you know.
Everybody wants to know what's the most aerodynamic shape, and I've showed it many, many times.
Yep.
And I have a picture. I have a picture of an aerodynamicist that designed a bend. And all the bends that I see, every single one, and I don't put myself out there and say what I'm about to say ever, but I'm going to say this. They're all wrong. They're all wrong, wrong, wrong. This is the most aerodynamic shape you could possibly have. Now on a hood scoop, let's just do this.
Mm-hmm.
This evens out the air speeds in the system. And you could, the carburetor barrels are down here. This turns into the carburetors. Doesn't shoot across the carbs. It has a turn. But this allows it to turn efficiently and maintain the pressure as the area decreases going to the back. What you're looking at there is every short side and every cylinder head I've ever developed since 1992. It's the short side. It's how NASA learned to turn 2 ducts on the F-104 aardvark into a single engine, or the engines. It's how this is just the most aerodynamic shape for turning. So any elbow, and I've wanted to design this with somebody forever. This is the opening that you would bolt your intake tube to. Let me redraw this. Okay, there's your opening. Your turbo is going to bolt to that diameter.
Right.
Then it's going to go in and bend into a carburetor. It's a blow-through system.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way the turn should look. That's what it should look like at the turn. Why should it look like that? Because this is the most efficient way to turn air around a corner without having to make it larger to do it. That's why.
Okay.
And I see these diesel ones, they have dividers in the center. Or like this, I'm sorry, they're like this. God, all they have to do is pick up a NASA tech paper. It's so easy. They have this like this, and then they have a divider. And this divider goes all the way in and turns. Why would they do that? Because all the air is down here. And it's too fast. And it's going to rob the air, all the runners on this side, and supercharge the back because it can't turn.
Mm-hmm.
All they have to do is take that out, do this, and it'll do exactly what they want to at a higher efficiency, increasing power. I wanted to call Gale Banks.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
I saw one of his, and it's similar, one of his new ones. And I thought, finally.
All right. Nuber says, Darin, can I possibly tune the harmonic on a single-cylinder engine?
Nope.
Well, that was
Can't
easy.
be done. Believe me, I've tried. I've tried length rudders, plenum manifolds, dual plenum. I've tried split harmonic shit. I actually tried. You have your flathead cylinder. You have your valve. So the port should be about 45 degrees for optimum intake flow because the head's going to be like this. So you're shooting the air like this. If it tries to come in like this, it just shuts everything down, and you only use about 35% of that valve area when you do that. So you do a 45 degrees, and on the Kohlers, these are actually leaned out like this, which is somewhat beneficial. I've tried plenums. I've tried building plenums out here like this and mounting the carb right here. I've tried different lengths, tapers, and everything else. The only thing that ever made any more power was taking a valve shaped like this and going and shaping it like this and narrowing this up. So basically, it's a horrible picture. So the first valves that Manley put in their catalog were the ones that I designed for them because I was doing some stuff with McCullough and we found this out, and I called them and I said, dude, you got to make your valves this way. The best flathead valve looks like this. Exactly wrong for any other form, because when this opens, there's no flow back here. It's all right there. And if you have a radius here, all that does is shut that flow zone down. Now, how did I know that? Because we tested it back and forth on the dyno about, I don't know, 150 different times. Different valve shapes, taking old pro stock valves and shit out of titanium and turning them down and playing with it. And the 45 degrees comes from playing with it.
Okay.
I was taking old Briggs and Strattons and chopping the side of the block off of the intake and welding the tube to the block. And that's how we were doing it in 1990. And then we were boring them out and sleeving them. So the jug itself was held by about 40 thousandths of an inch at the base of the cylinder. So we had half-inch plates, huge plates, by 4 half-inch studs holding the whole system together. Otherwise, it would just launch the jug right to the stratosphere.
Jesus, man.
You'd be going down the straightaway and poof, off it would go. So when I was younger, yeah, I played with Briggs. It's fun.
I think we all did. You know, we all had the mini bike or the go-kart or something.
That was the first engine I ever ported in the 8th grade was a Briggs.
Darin, if I check air speeds and PRP of a cylinder head and then bolt an intake on, will the high and low velocity areas move around due to intake being bolted on?
It can. It
Okay.
can. Move around, meaning move forward, fore and aft, or a little bit side to side. Or you have a velocity gradient that's 80-20 and it reduces it to 730. Yeah, that could absolutely happen.
Okay.
I'm going to take a short break. Be right back.
Yep. So anyway, so let me get back to a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Tomorrow's chat at 7 p.m. is IHRA. And that's going to be good. I think that the guy that owns it, Daryl Cuddle, I think his name is. Now, he's been buying a lot of tracks around here, at least where I live. Driveway 42, he bought. He also bought Milan, Michigan, which is now Durana. They're calling them Durana dragways. And I think part of it is his name and the other part of it is his sister's name. But they just picked up, I think, Atlanta Dragway. I just saw that where the county or the town said, hey, it's okay to race on Sundays, but you can't race until noon. So we'll ask them about that. I kind of want to see what their plan is. You know, there's a mixed feelings between NHRA and IHRA. And a lot of guys have a bad taste in NHRA just because of how it is now. I mean, look at Pro Stock. There isn't any competition. It's all one engine. It's all basically one car. And I mean, what fun is that? It's like someone else mentioned about NASCAR, the same thing. You know, once the restrictor plates were put on, no one wanted to watch it anymore. And now there's only 4 engine, I think, builders. You guys can comment on that, but the competition's out of it. It's just who wants to watch that? So I'm interested to see what the plan is for NHRA. And I had talked to Warren Johnson on Thursday. I was calling him. We talked for a little while. Great guy to talk to. But he's pretty excited about IHRA coming in and trying to renew this. I mean, he said
I'm excited about it.
He said the most important thing when it comes to it is, he said, are the spectators, the sponsors, the racers, and then the sanctioning body. That's how it should be. That's how he feels. So we'll talk to this. His name is Woody, and Scott Woodruff.
I'm really, really interested in hearing his perspective. I mean, I've been in this game 50 years now, and I can't give him any advice, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go.
Well, this guy worked for Elite. I met him when I was hanging out with Frank Iaconio. Frank invited me to the races a couple of years in a row, and I hung out with him at the Pro Stock pits of Quadra Brothers. He did Christian Quadra's engine. So I was there, and I talked to Erica Enders because I was going to get her on to do a live chat. And this guy comes up, this Scott Woodruff, and he says, he's talking to Frank, and Frank goes, hey, you need to know him. And I'm like, who's this? And he says, oh, this is Scott Woodruff. He works for Elite. I said, oh, okay. So he was like the manager for Elite. And I had called him. I found his card from PRI in this pile, and I said, I'm going to call him and see if I can get Erica on. So I called there, and he said, listen, I don't work for them anymore. You know, I got hired. I work for IHRA. And I said, okay, what's your position? He said, I'm director of fun. And I said, that's a great title. And I said, what do you mean? You know, I thought you were in the drag race. He is, but that's what we want to talk about, fun. That's what we want to bring back, is fun back into racing, for families, for the racer, for everybody. And I mean, that's a different kind of vision, I guess. I don't know. We'll find out.
Socioeconomically, the amount of spare income a guy has to spend on this, it's not like it was.
You mean as far as what? The racer or the
Yeah.
spectator, or you're the guy that's owned this stuff? What do you mean, spare income?
Well, everyone.
Okay.
You know, there was a lot more money driven into all forms of racing from 80 to 2000. And then it started kind of dying off. Well, the manufacturers, it was in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, it was race on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Sure.
That was the motto.
Right.
Well, now the cars don't have any resemblance to factory vehicles. You can't use them as an advertising avenue to pick up sales. So the factories, all OEMs just backed out. There's no support. But the good thing about that is we now have the machining processes and the know-how to do everything ourselves. So in my point of view, a small block pro stock class, limited 400, 11,000 RPM, billet, valve size, bore, stroke, everything mandated, that separates the man from the boys. Here's your combination. You go make as much power as you can. And here's your car. You make it as efficient as you possibly can.
Agreed.
That would be some tight racing, extremely competitive. Just my point of view.
I like it. Australian pro stock, you know?
And if you had a class like that and you got it started, the billet component price would start to come down with the volume of heads that were made. I mean, I could produce a billet cylinder head for the exact same cost or less right now than I can a cast cylinder head.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Now, the billet costs are skyrocketing, so that's going to play into it.
I mean, a cast head is like 60 grand to develop. Alan Root was telling me. It's about what it costs to get the patterns made and everything's about 60 grand.
I can have anything drawn up for 10 grand and have a head in my hands in 3-4 months.
And then it's a matter of programming.
Yeah. And once you've made that head and you made 5-10 sets of them, then you could amortize the cost or R&D cost, which really isn't that much anymore, not what it used to be.
Used to be, yeah.
And the cost will start coming down.
Let's see, here we go. Eric McMahon says, Darin, if I check airspeeds in PRP of a cylinder head and then bolt an intake on, will the high and low velocity areas move around? And you said that it did?
Yeah.
Correct? Okay.
It can. Not in all cases, but it can. And you can influence sometimes a bad port by the aim of the runner. Not really the way you would do it in a clean sheet of paper environment, but if you need to band-aid a poor situation, yeah.
Pontiac 411 says, thanks for taking the time to answer the average guy's questions. You two are a rare breed. Thank you for being here. Now, we got 100.
A lot of the guys now from my era, I can't believe I'm using that terminology, are talking. A lot of them are.
Okay.
Because they know, just as I know, that the way I came up and the extremely rare and lucky situation I was put into, where I had a job where you go make power, tell me if you need money, and if you fail, you're fired, doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist. I mean, how many guys you know that spend their life with 10 engines in rotation off and on the dyno trying 10 different piston designs, 20 different ring designs, 100 manifolds? It doesn't exist anymore.
Jeffrey, thank you for the contribution. Goes to Darin. Thank you, Tim and Darin. Great information as always. Thank you. He's an LS racer. I had to throw that out there for him.
The LS engine, that platform, it's one of those things where there's kind of a, I don't know how to put it, but I was thinking about this just the other day. It's like the GM engineers had the chance to design an engine. They gave it all the valve area, more valve area than it needed, a set of cylinder heads that will breathe to 9,000 RPM if you wanted to. The ability to put the camshaft, core size, lift, and everything else. But they really screwed the pooch when they did, a full skirted block. That's 40 horsepower out the window.
Okay.
Dart has fixed that problem with their LS blocks, but people still won't use them, and I don't understand why. The crankcase is too narrow. The bearings are too narrow. The throws are too narrow. It's so compact that it's very, very hard to get the friction power due to windage down by turning everything down and heavy metaling it. And as you add stroke, because of that narrowness, it adds a whole bunch of problems, especially the center main. And the oiling is complete shit. I mean, it's like designing a cylinder head for an engine that's technology is in the 20th first century, and a block that was designed in 1955, meaning the side oiler FE. It's like, why did you do that? I never understood why they did that. So to give you an indication of how inefficient the oiling system on an LS engine is, when Dart did the LS next, when Richard Maskin decided, this is ridiculous, I'm going to design a block to actually accent the cylinder heads and induction system the cylinder head has. If I got the prototype block, the first block, and we were dynoing it, we dynoed the stock block, switched everything over, and dynoed his block, and it literally blew the oil filter off the back of the block and pegged the oil pressure. I had to cut the spring in half just to get it down to 80 pounds. That's how efficient that system was.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, and it was 23 horsepower. The oiling system alone, reducing the bypass oil flow, reducing all the oil that shoots underneath the bearing shell on top of the bearing shell with those thin bearings, is 20 horse. And the full skirted kills another 40 horse. As a matter of fact, when Larry Morgan first went to Mopar, Pro Stock, their blocks were fully skirted. And he couldn't understand. He had the same valve size, all the dimensions. He was 60 horsepower down. And it was just like, this is insane. What's wrong? Well, it was this full skirted block. So he cut holes in the side of the block and did everything he could to try to suck the oil off of the crankshaft before it got around there. It just wraps up with the crank and it won't let go. And the friction power just skyrockets. So he cut holes in the side of the block and built a bypass. How much power? Just cutting holes in the side of that full skirted block. How much power do you think that was?
Had to be 60 horsepower or more.
40
80?
horse.
40
horsepower. He was missing 60 because a full skirted block at that engine speed, as the engine speed increases, if you have an oiling problem, it manifests itself bigger and bigger and bigger as the engine speed increases. So what's 30 horsepower on a 7,000 RPM is 60 horsepower on a 10,000 RPM.
Okay. So you're saying switching a block from a stock GM block to a Dart block, you could pick up easily 40 to 60 horsepower.
Easy. Yeah. just 30 horsepower.
Does anybody know this? They must know it.
I don't know. I've yelled it from the rafters for decades, but
Sounds
that
like
and the only other problem with the LS platform is the short fulcrum rocker. So you have all the valve area and port that you could lift that thing to 1 inch, but your rocker is so short that it just runs right off the valve. It
Yep.
just, you can't get its arc is so small. 800 is, you can't even get 800 without it scrubbing and killing
Okay.
lift.
So you have to get a different rocker arm then. You know.
Yeah.
So Caleb says, on an engine, thank you for the contribution of $20, Caleb. Appreciate that. On an engine punching above its weight, for instance, a 565 cubic inch with heads that flow 480 at 1 inch, that makes north of 1,200 horsepower, does it make more power going to a 4.375 stroke from a 4.250, or does it just lower RPM?
Okay. It will make more power going to a 4375. It will make less power per cubic inch going to a 4375.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, in most cases, and in that case, I would say, yeah, it probably would a little bit, not much.
Okay.
480 CFM and 1200 matches perfectly. So,
Nope.
go
Getting the
ahead.
calculator out. Oh,
Mm-mm.
Jeff says competition between all is healthy. Car manufacturers, sanctioning bodies, parts manufacturers. Yep, that's how it is. That's what it is. Competition, man. That's what makes things grow.
Yeah.
I like
I
what
mean,
Joel says.
if your competitor isn't out there kicking your ass, what is
Yeah.
forcing you to do better? It's
Nothing.
nothing. That's what forces us to learn more
That's
and
right.
advance ourselves. Lack of competition means stagnation.
Exactly. When you get too comfortable in where you're at, you lose focus. Joel DeBose says, go back to the original ways that did things. Factory cars, racers' names like Snake and Mongoose that set up rivalry, media like radio, Saturday, Sunday, fire breathing, ground pounding. Yep. I'm telling you, I would love to see Pro Stack come back from the 70s and 80 cars that year's cubic weight to cubic inch, just like it was, you know.
You know, I can still remember those radio ads. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it was advertised. People knew about it.
Oh yeah.
It was
No
it
doubt.
was it the NMRA that used to hand out tickets for free? There was one of those organizations that
Could be.
gave tickets away. They would go to every speed shop, every outlet, and just say, "Here, these are free. It's a $30 value,
Yep.
but we're
Yep.
going to give you 100 tickets to hand out to your customers." So what that did was it eliminated the gate fee, but when you're in there, you still got to eat. You still got to buy hot dogs and hamburgers, and you still got to buy T-shirts and all that stuff. So you made it up on the back end.
Oh
But
yeah.
they were packed. They were packed.
Daniel Wilson says the new IHRA rules. I think
Yeah,
so too.
I would love to see that.
Let's see. This is another one. NHRA has jumped the shark. The HR thing will help the rest of us. I think
In my
so.
personal opinion, in my humble personal opinion,
Be humble.
everything, it seems like everything that I used to look up to and do has been corporatized, just for profit, stripped of all competition, stripped of any individualism, stripped of everything. Profit motivation, period. So no R&D, no playing around, try to make something better. Just wring its frickin' neck, sell as many as you can, you know, and put on a show. God, am I getting that old? Am I
Yeah.
losing perspective with the world? I don't get it anymore.
It's just an age thing, I think. You know.
I mean, when everything is profit driven instead of competition driven,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the point. I'm
Mm-mm.
sorry. This has never been about money.
Nope. They always say you got to spend money to make money, you know? Here's a question. It says, Vintage Adventures Drives. That's Tanner. He says, what kind of throat sizes are we seeing with these high mock ports? What
About
percentage?
93 and a half.
There it is, baby. What percentage of valve size do they typically run?
Yeah, about 93 and a half.
Okay. Any
You know,
idea?
it's like, you know, the 90% rule, I always said safe.
Yeah.
Is it going to be the most powerful? No.
No.
Is it going to be optimal? No. But it's safe. If you try to make it bigger and the engine isn't demanding that, then it's going to knock the wind out of it. It's not going to accelerate as well. It's not going to make as much torque. So if the air speeds are just ridiculous and you're trying to get more air in the engine at a higher airspeed, only at that point can you decrease the discharge coefficient in favor of area and make a gain. That's the only situation that I see that take place.
Okay. And he also says, I've been here for less than 3 minutes. I'm already learning a lot. That's the goal, baby. Thanks, Tanner. Now, this is a good one. Darin, do you think BS, you guys could build a winning NHRA Pro Stock engine?
I think a lot of shops can. There are,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Warren could do it tomorrow. It
No
just comes
doubt.
down to money and sponsorship. There's no money there.
Yep. Comes down to the money. Everything comes
You
down
have to have a team. First off, you have to have a team. No one man can do all this.
Mhm.
You have to have the head honcho, the main in charge, and then you have to have the chiefs and then the Indians.
Yep.
You've got to have the head guy and the engine builder and the MMFIC, and I mean, you have to have everything, and that team has to work together and gel in order for a pro stock team to succeed. Otherwise,
Ain't going to
it ain't
happen,
happening.
no matter how your engine is. Mitten Made Muscle. Darin, any experience with the Brodix BB3 oval port heads? Worth the money versus going to a non-conventional head for a pup gas 11-to-1 solid roller single plane intake?
Worth the money going to a non-conventional? No, absolutely not. You can more than feed 11-to-1 solid roller with a single plane up
Yeah.
to 500 to, you don't give me cubic inches or anything, but 500 to 565 cubic inches up to 7,500 with a BB3. It's only when you start shoving the engine speeds up to 9 do you start needing to go into spread ports and taller stuff.
Okay.
And I take it that is a street strip application with 11-to-1.
If not, he'll make a comment. Chris, good to see you here. Darin, you've said tall and skinny ports are the worst possible design. LS1 is not great.
Well, the LS1 performs the job it was designed for perfectly.
Yep.
And that is to fit under a hood of a Corvette that's that far above the valve covers
Yeah.
and still fit 18 inches of runner length under that hood. That they do awesome. They are not a racing cylinder head.
Okay. Samuel Friedman says, did you see Steve Morris dyno an aircraft big block shed
No, I
with
didn't.
plugs? There was a 100 horsepower shift from one spark plug versus the other spark plug, all because of spark location. Interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
That is crazy.
And, you know, you look at well, if you look in the NHRA rule book, you will see the rule one spark plug, stock location.
Ah,
Why did they put that rule in there? Because Rear Morrison, Buddy Morrison, and David
Yep.
Rare used their ass up with 2 plugs. They routed another plug in the valve cover, or in the lifter valley. The
Flip it.
plug went, through the China wall
yeah.
into the lifter valley, and the plugs were plugged, in there, underneath the intake port.
Really?
I forget how much power it was, 30 or 40 horsepower. But what was crazy was where's my pen? So the plug that was right here,
Uh-huh.
You have this quench area right there.
Yeah.
This plug was closer to bore center. There was 20 horsepower difference between the plugs. If you took this one and just used the one that they went through the valve cover, it was actually worth more power.
Wow.
And 2 plugs is the only reason that the modern generation Hemi
Mm-hmm.
engines could pass emissions, much less run decent. If they didn't have 2 plugs, they couldn't even pass emissions. It makes them really inefficient.
Bruce says, that's it. I'm cutting holes in my 428 Pontiac block.
I
Good to
did
go.
an engine, talk about going through the China rail.
Yeah.
I did an engine in '93 for what they call a speed trial aircraft, which was, I think it was it was a 3.5 liter Buick. It was inverted in the aircraft, so the valve covers are down, the crankshaft's up.
Wow.
So everything was sumped out of the valve covers,
Yep.
but the landing gear was even with the valve covers. So I came out of the intake ports, the ports like this. I came out of the intake ports straight. They crossed each other, turned, and went down into the lifter valley, and the plenum was built in the lifter valley. And the intake went through the China rail, the intake tube.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know if I want to be flying in that plane.
We've done 75% Mustangs and stuff like that with Clevelands.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Jeff says, I was shocked when Darin revealed how much power no oil pan was worth on a pro stock big block Chevy. It's like, what was it, 140 or something crazy like that?
110.
110. Okay.
Mm-hmm. To tell that story again, Buddy and David were wondering,
Clip it.
okay, we're trying all these pans, we're trying all these louvers. And, like Venetian blinds, we
Yeah.
had those in pans. We could control how they were aimed at the crank and trying all that, and screens and baffles. And they looked at each other and go, how much are we fighting for? I mean, is there 10 left? Is there 100? We don't know. Screw it. Drop the oil pan, stick the sump in some oil, and yank it. Let's see how much is there. Well, there was 60 horsepower left. They found out.
Wow. Bill Anderson, thank you. $1.99. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Joel DeBose says, Top Fuel draws the crowd. IHRA in the past never had the big cars. Interesting.
Yeah, but Pro Mods,
They're pretty, I like them. I think I probably like them better than Top Fuel. I don't know.
I think they're a crowd getter. The
Yeah.
Pro Mod class is exciting. It really is exciting. I mean, you're talking about cars that are on the edge. They're on the edge. And they spit fire, and they're loud and crazy and wild.
Oh, yeah. Now, Bill Anderson says, please tell the story about the R&D Pro Stock exhaust ports, Darin.
Oh, God. Which ones? You're going to have to elaborate a little bit.
Bill, put some notes in the comment down here. We'll
As far as the exhaust ports, how did we learn that the big throat worked? Maybe that's what he's referring to. Well,
tell it.
David and Buddy wanted to
Flip it.
put a bigger intake valve in there to see if more inlet flow would help.
Okay.
So you can't put a bigger intake in there unless you shrink the exhaust. So they just shrank the exhaust and it dropped a little, and the throat size relative to that shrunk valve was about 95% of the valve. And they're like, oh, that's probably going to hurt it. But we got a bigger intake. We got 25 more CFM airflow. Well, the engine made 20 some more horsepower, and they're like, yes. So then they do a new set of cylinder heads, except they correct the throat valve, exhaust valve relationship with the new intake valve. And the power was gone. So they're, okay, what happened? Well, the only difference was that we opened up that exhaust throat and ended up 95% and killed 30 CFM of airflow. That can't be it. That was it. It needed more area. Screw the flow bench.
Right.
You can't design an exhaust port on a flow bench. That's how we learned you can't design an exhaust port on a flow bench. Now, what you do look for on the flow bench when it comes to exhaust port is how smooth and silent it is.
Mm-hmm.
Two exhaust ports that flow the exact same curve. The one that's smooth and silent, meaning the more pressure you crank to it, the more silent it gets. That will outpower the one that flows the same, but is wispy and nasty and fluttery.
Wow. You only know that
As a
through
matter of
R&D.
fact, a pro stock exhaust port at 500 lift will go silent instantly. You can go come off a 500 lift, it just goes dead silent. And the more pressure you crank, the smoother it gets. And if you've ever seen a flow curve like that on the exhaust, it's different because normal exhaust flow curves look like that.
Yeah.
A pro stock looks like that. Well, not exactly like that. Like there's 500 lift.
Yep.
There at 500 lift, 0.450 to 0.550, it goes dead silent, and you could just keep cranking pressure to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets more silent. That's no pipe. With a pipe, it does the same thing, but you can't hear it as much. And here's another thing. People say flow with a pipe. You should flow with a pipe, but you should also flow without a pipe. Because if you have an exhaust port that has an issue, let's say the exhaust port comes out and makes a turn like this, like the old spread ports.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do this anymore. And it's a 90-degree flange, which is absolutely horrific. Today, what we do is we come out like this. Yeah, that sucks. The short side sucks. We'll come out like this and turn. We'll turn it down here and let it stabilize instead of the way we used to think was stabilize it and then turn it. Nope. If you look at all pro stocks, they have the exhaust flange is not 90 degrees. It's anywhere from 14 to 16 degrees. And what that does over a 90-degree flange, where that port comes out, it makes your roof and floor more of equal length, and the air doesn't try to roll over itself, form this vortex, and the air tries to come back in, because it will do that. If you have airflow separation, the air that comes out here turns around and comes back in on the floor. So by opening that up, you're getting rid of that gradient right there and getting rid of that nasty spot, dead spot, where your reversion characteristics can act on the exhaust port. And when you just come out, turn, and shoot straight out like that, you have a lot of control on your taper, your exit airspeed, and your header placement. So you have a tunability there.
And the best thing is like 3 inches straight right from the head before you turn, right? Is that what you're
There are a
saying?
lot of, you know what, Burns would be the person to probably ask about that. Guys who design cylinder headers, because
Yeah.
there are some theories that I hear. Is it 6 inches? It should go 6 to 8 inches off straight. Okay, yeah, that works. We've seen that work. But is it 6 or is it 8? Or is it the volume of that runner, including that 8 inches, equal to the cylinder? Or what conclusions could we draw from that? I don't know. Everybody just says 6 to 8 inches straight, and it works.
Well, maybe we better get Burns on here and we'll see what he's got to say.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. All right, Dr. Burgess. Top Fuel Lawnmower by Morgan, Briggs and Stratton. There you go. New class. Thank you.
I've always been perpetually curious and interested in the A-dragsters, normally aspirated nitro. Those things, I mean, the fuel density that nitro is like trying to flow molasses. So it doesn't atomize, and nitro makes more power deflagrating out of a solid state than it does an atomized state anyway. But if you look at those, they have runners this long.
Yeah.
Because the harmonic tuning is still applicable. They still need that. It's a normally aspirated engine. So they have to set up a charged column. So I've always been interested in that, but I've never been able to sit down and talk to anybody that races that class.
Okay. It's interesting stuff. For sure. Sam Hayden Performance. Regarding the chamber discussion earlier, what are your thoughts on vane direction on the roof of the intake bowl, i.e. the wet flow of an LS7 vane shaped towards the bore wall versus one going to bore center?
Okay. Oh boy. There's a couple of ways to look at this. In an all-out racing cylinder head designed to operate over 1,500 to 2,000 RPM at a high engine speed, you would never do that. That is detrimental, hands down, trying to point a wing anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The wing is only there in a high-speed engine to recover the pressure behind the guide. And the easiest way to know where that goes is to put the valve at max lift and just spray Dicom in there on the flow bench. It will show you exactly where that wing needs to go. It'll actually trace out where it needs to go. So if you want to know where the wing needs to be, just do that. It'll show you. What they do by hooking the wing over to the bore wall is, remember on the video, the pictures we just saw, the lane area on that side of the chamber? Well, it's pretty damn bad on an LS7. It's real bad. Because the chamber has very little pressure recovery. The lift is low. It sees a big area. It dumps a lot of pressure. So it can't control, it has no airspeed to pull the fuel over there. So that is a means by which they can attain the port volume and the airflow and force the air over there. Is it the proper way to do it? Yeah, in that case, yes. Could I do it any other way and achieve the same results? Yes, you can. And the way you do that is, you have the port opening, and you're going to have to kick out around the push rod, meaning you're going to have some kick out of the push rod. So this side of the bowl is going to be dead airspeed wise. So you point your wing over here to take the fuel that's fallen out of suspension and put it over here in the lean area of the chamber so it won't detonate, or reduces the detonation sensitivity of the chamber. You have no airspeed, your fuel mixture is already fallen out, and you have to go through a wide range of airspeed on those heads if they're street driven. If it's a street strip deal, you have no airspeed until you hit 500-600 over peak torque all the way to the shift point. Do you have enough airspeed to carry the fuel over there in the first place? So when you're loading the engine at its torque peak and the airspeed's low, now you have a detonation sensitive chamber. So that's what this is doing. It's taking all the fuel that's fallen out, and you have this square port, and you have the port is out here. So this is the short side. It's kicked out around. What you're seeing is this kick right here. It's going around. So instead of putting a wing that points over there, just knock that part of the port off, which looks something like that, doesn't it? That's what you're doing. Making the short side wider, this faster. If you can make that faster and carry the fuel around the corner, you can decrease the effect. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't decrease the effect enough on a street driven vehicle when you're piddle putting around at 2,500, 3,000, and then smack the throttle and go into full load, and now you got air fuel separation. And it'll make more power because you can run more timing, chambers more efficient, yada yada yada. So in street strip applications, the wing is absolutely helpful. In an all-out racing head, you would never do that. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Thank you. Bill Anderson, thank you. $49.99. That goes to Darin for just taking time away from his family to be with.
We're at 3 hours again.
Listen, it's 2 hours and 57 minutes. I don't know, man. It just must be that's the time it takes to do this. We said, didn't we say let's try to limit it at 2 hours? Yeah.
Yeah, but don't we always say that?
I think we do, because it's getting to be a habit that we say that. Kind of, I don't know. I'm trying to see if there's anything we can roll through here. 59 Max says, hi, Tim. Love the conversation. My mind is blown by the technical knowledge that you are bringing to everyone. Well, Darin's bringing it here. I'm just kind of helping. And that must be Larry Courtcamp, I bet. He's the only one I know that has a 59 Mac. So let's run down through here. AC, good to see you here. Good stuff, Tim and Darin. Thank you so much. It's true. It's a good time to be alive and learning from you guys. I just wish I was 30 years younger. Well, so do we. There's no doubt about that.
If I could only go back in time knowing what I know now.
Man, ain't that the truth?
It's kind of funny when you think about it. Why didn't we just do then what we're doing now?
Well,
right?
It depends on what we're doing now. What do you mean?
Why don't we do what we're going to be doing in 20 years right now?
Oh. Well, we don't know what we're going to do in 20 years, I guess.
R&D, I always say, and I've had drivers and team owners that invest in what I call the golden BB theory. You know, it's like you can spray a shotgun shell full of BBs and hope one hits.
Yep.
You know, or you can aim the rifle and pull the trigger and hit the same target. You can't go from zero to hero in one fell swoop. It's small, tiny, incremental steps to climb any ladder on any engine that you do. And I really want to get this point across. Doesn't matter what engine you have, gaining power and moving forward is a series of steps. And there's no way to get around that. I had a driver one time on a pro stock team that just wanted to change everything all the time. You know, there's a time for R&D, there's a time for testing, and then there's a time for racing. And when you're racing, you don't change shit. You race what you have. And some people never get that in their head.
It's just like in medicine, the same thing in the ER. They call it the shotgun approach. Patient comes
Yeah.
in, they're sick. What do? I don't do it, but a lot of providers will just order a CT scan of the abdomen and pelvis automatically before they even go examine the patient. They just order all the labs and a checklist, bam, bam, bam. And then sometimes docs don't even go see the patient. They don't even examine them. They order all this tests, and then the tests come back, they go see the patient. If you go
The
examine
shotgun
them,
method was the
right,
way we did things in the 90s.
but you learn, and now you can go point blank. Hey, I'm going to go right here. I want to examine the patient. That abdomen is not acute. This is not emergency. I don't need to get a CT scan. Let's see what the labs are. You know,
Same with a manifold. I don't have to build 5 manifolds of different length taper and everything
right?
else and saw those apart and change those up in order to pick up a trend and find what that engine wants. I now know how to calculate the air speeds and the harmonics and everything, and I could get 95% of the way there with any manifold.
We'll
But what happens if I want to raise the engine speed 1,000 RPM? Am I going to be able to, if I want to go 13,000 RPM with a 2-valve engine, am I going to know how to design that manifold? No, absolutely not. I'm going to have to take small incremental steps to get there. I have an
right.
idea of where it might be, but I guarantee you it's going to be different.
Yep, no doubt. I'll take this one last comment, and it says, Darin, can I contact you for a consultation on my engine combination? Would you'd like to do a set of Ford D3 heads? I can cover the cost for consult. He contributed $50 Canadian. I'll talk to you about that, Mike.
Yeah, and doing consultation work is really, really hard for me. I mean,
Yep.
I don't get to bed till midnight or 1 a.m. I get 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. I'm constantly working on everything. So finding the time, I would love to do it. Absolutely love to do it. Finding the time to do it, however, is becoming exceedingly difficult for me. So I can't guarantee I can. I would love to, but I can't guarantee it. If you want to send me an email, I will try. That's the best I could do.
I'll send you a message back, Mike. Darin and I have talked about this, so we'll get back with you on that. 3 hours and 3 minutes, 183 people here. You know, the question comes down to, we had talked about this before, Darin. You said maybe we should do a live chat where there's no presentation. All we do is do a set limit, say an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, and we just do question and answer. Everybody gets a chance, you know, because there's more questions, but we just, you know, we can't be here for 4 and 5 hours. So maybe we'll
I'm
talk
in the
about
process of doing a spec list. In other words, if we're going to do this, I was thinking, this is a thought that we're thinking about doing. We're not sure. So I would need the engine specs, the CID, the stroke, the engine type, what it's used for. And then you would have to send that to me prior, and then we could go over it with everybody. And I think everybody would learn from that. But
it would have to be like
right,
5 spec sheets or whatever, you know, pick certain, you can't do 20 of them. You know, I already made
I could probably do, in 3 hours, I could probably do 3.
Okay. But that would have to be complete information right down to the head flow, to the, you know, the car, the combination.
And not only that, but what your R&D was before, and you have to tell me how you ended up where you ended up. Because that's just as important. Knowing where you've been gives me an indication of where we could go.
Okay.
This is not easy.
No.
Especially when you're dealing with so many different engine combinations.
And that's the thing. Nobody is doing this. There's nobody that does this. You and Chad have been the only two that I've seen where you can sit down and someone can ask a question on a combo and you guys are coming up with the answer. You know,
it's like a guy asked me some questions on a Porsche engine, and I'm just like, dude, I'm out. Not my forte. Never did any R&D in any. The harmonics are a complete mystery to me. Not the person to ask.
I get it, you know. And Ty says something here. Still, we need a class. Well, you know, that'd be nice, but there again, it comes down to the time. It's Darin's
I've been
time.
talking to Tony about doing hands-on classes. You know, I think 5 to 6 guys. I've tried the 15 to 20
It's too many.
classes,
Yep. Yep.
and you can't pay individual attention to
I
people
get it.
enough. So 5 or 6 is just enough. That's enough.
Yep. And then that's what
2
we're talking
days
about. Virtual
on the
porting, where we
weekends.
record it. We have another venue for guys that can't go there but want to learn, and we put it on a video for virtual porting
And
format.
at Ruhr Morrison, what I did was, for hands-on classes, I
Mhm.
said, bring the cylinder heads from the engine you're interested in, manifolds, whatever.
Yeah.
Bring your manifold and heads that you're working on, that you're interested in, and then we'll go on the flow bench, we'll analyze it, and formulate a plan to move forward.
The Sam says I'd pay thousands for that. Laugh out loud. Well, you know what?
It's about $1,250 for 2 days is what it cost.
Well, that was 20 years ago. This is times have changed. So I'm serious. I mean, this is
Yeah,
how
it was 20 years ago.
Yeah. So we
Time
couldn't set
flies.
anything right now until we examine and investigate.
I've never had anyone go through the hands-on deal
Yep.
that didn't say it was worth 5 times more, saving them money and time.
And it's something you'll have forever, and you can build on that. So, you know, we'll talk about it after we get off the air. I don't want to keep you going because I promised you 3 hours, and it's already 3 hours and 7 minutes. Guys, thank you for stopping by DragBoss Garage and Darin Morgan Induction. Because like I always tell you, you're always seeing and learning something new. And I'm telling you, we hold that true. So,
And the more you know, the faster you go.
and the more you know. Cliche, baby. That's it. Thank you guys for the contributions and being here. And the members have a chat on the 28th, so don't forget to be there. Now check this out. I think you're going to like this too.